I'm not hearing anything. I'm not.
And welcome into the Monday edition of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Mark Howard in the house this morning as well. Ryan Porth here with you on this Monday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. We've got a lot to get into today here on the show. A busy weekend in the world of sports. Corey Curtis dropping by at 8 o'clock from News 2. Darren McFarland at 9 o'clock to recap what was a pretty cool weekend here from a NASCAR perspective as well, coming up at 9 o'clock. So a lot to get to on that front. As always, taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Mr. Mark Howard, how are we doing?
Good, Robbie. I have a major announcement, by the way, to start out the show.
Okay.
And that is to comply with Major League Baseball. I will not be doing this show with any sticky substances to increase my spin rate.
That's good. That's good. I mean, that's something that we've had to deal with for a long time with Howard. He comes in and the spin rate. Yeah, you got to check his hands. I mean, the spin rate. There's a lot of movement on that breaking ball.
Got to check for that sunscreen and rosin.
Yeah, sunscreen, rosin, everything.
So if my hands have a sticky substance, it's a donut.
There you go.
It's
not spider
nothing
tack.
else. It's not spider tack.
There you go. That's good to know. I'm glad we established that. So what do you think? What do you think of all that? That's been the story in Major League Baseball the last few weeks.
Well, I think it's significant. I mean, everybody says it's an overrated story. It's not an overrated story. You talk to hitters around Major League Baseball, and they'll tell you that with the spider tack or whatever else they were using, they were seeing pitches that they've never seen before. Yeah. And now it's sort of leveling out the playing field a little bit. But, with some pitchers, they're still going to be great. But I think it's going to affect some.
I think so, too. So we'll keep you monitored on that. We talked about that. Had a lot of spirited discussion on that on Friday with our listeners. Some hate it. Some really don't care about the spider tack. Don't really care about cheating in baseball. It's been interesting to watch how that works. So we'll continue that conversation throughout the show today as well on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. A busy weekend in the world of sports. We'll get to the College World Series coming up here in just a few minutes because obviously Vanderbilt and Tennessee in action over the weekend as well with varying results on that front. Let's start with the NHL. Old Barry Trotz. He's doing it again. It's 2-2 between the Lightning and the Canadiens. Vegas wins last night, 2-2 in that series as well. We've got some good Stanley Cup semifinals going on, Ryan Porth.
Well, I think, Vegas, the way they absolutely gacked away Game 3.
Yeah.
Marc-Andre Fleury with that misplay in front of the net and Josh Anderson cashing in, and then the Canadiens winning again in overtime. And then last night, Montreal leading 1-0 till midway through the third period, and going into that defensive shell that makes it just really difficult to get to the net, to get through the neutral zone, and Vegas, figured out a way to tie it and then win it in overtime. And I think if Vegas hoists the cup, which is unfortunately a definite possibility, I'm not a big fan of the Golden Knights, but
I think you speak for a lot of people.
But anyway, they will point to Game 4
as
one of the turning points because going back to Vegas down 3-1, they would have been frustrated. Canadians would have been in their heads. But now it's the best of 3, and it's by no means over. But Vegas, can look right now and see that it's the best of 3, and 2 of those games are going to be in their house. And, I think that's a distinct advantage.
Especially with the crowd they've got rolling in there right now, for
yes.
sure. Ryan Porth, no sweep for Vegas. No Vegas in 5 either.
Nope.
Bob is all over you on Twitter, by the way.
Is he?
Bob has been talking about you all weekend long on Twitter, whether it's the Islanders, whether it's the Canadiens. That Montreal, New York Islanders Stanley Cup final is still alive.
Well, yes, it's still alive. I haven't been ragging on the Islanders. I mean, I've thought all along that the Lightning would win the series, but that has been a series where I, even before the series started, could see going 7. because the Islanders are just a really, really tough team to play against right now. And yes, I did say Vegas sweeping Montreal because on paper those two teams aren't very close at all in my mind outside of the goaltending. So, credit to Montreal for cashing in on a stupid misplay by Fleury in Game 3. A lucky win in Game 3.
You know what I smell? I smell burnt money.
I do too. That's what I smell as well.
There was burnt money in another game this weekend. I'll say that.
Hey, at least the Ottawa Senators aren't involved anymore. There's a lot of burnt money on that front.
Oh, my gosh. Don't even get me started on the Ottawa Senators. My least favorite team in sports.
Really?
Sure they are.
Let me give you another one even worse. Say, hypothetically, you had the Dodgers minus 1.5 yesterday. Because that's what you do every morning.
Yeah.
You get up, you brush your teeth, you shave, and you bet on the Dodgers minus 1.5 against Arizona.
Yes.
They were up 9-1 in the 6th inning against Arizona. They were up 9-2 in the 8th inning against Arizona. And then Arizona, team dead men walking, scored 6 runs to make it 9-8. And then, of course, in the 9th, the Dodgers had first and third with 1 out. This is all stuff I heard. I just the rumor on the street. I had no emotional stake in this, of course. And the Dodgers didn't score, making the final 9-8. So if you had the Dodgers minus 1.5, you lose.
Yeah. Speaking of that, how about that over-under 11.5 for the Vandy game for Kumar Rocker in Arizona? We were sitting here on Fridays. Okay, does Vegas know something that we don't? And the answer is always yes.
They always know something. That line dropped, by the way, from 11.5 to 9.5 by before first pitch.
I know.
And I had someone tweet me saying, "Did you single-handedly drop that line?" I'm like, well, maybe. I played a part, obviously. And, I mean, I was texting you in the first inning. I was like, this over is going to hit. 3-1 after the first inning.
You could tell in the first inning.
It still had a prayer late in the game. And then Arizona ties it at 6.
Yeah.
And then it went down the drain.
Just a tough one, boys, over the weekend on that front.
Although I had one go my way opposite of Mark, of what he's saying. Blue Jays Orioles on Saturday, where the Orioles are up like 7-3 in the 8th, and the Blue Jays end up winning 10-7.
Okay.
And I had Blue Jays minus 2.5.
So it evens out.
Ryan, 2.5?
Yes.
Oh my boy, you are confident. Ryan Mountcastle had 3 home runs for the Orioles.
2.5. Ryan Forth just laying it out there with Major League Baseball lines. We'll get to weekend winners a little bit later this week. Another good weekend for Robby Stanley.
Good for you.
It's too late. A little bit too late here in the competition. What'd you think of NASCAR weekend coming to town?
I thought it was awesome.
Yeah.
And I have really experienced the whole spectrum of what's happened between NASCAR and Nashville. I got here in 1986, right, just a couple of years after NASCAR left, and covered a lot of things out at the fairgrounds. And Nashville was carrying the torch for NASCAR, who kind of led Nashville on. But it became pretty evident that Nashville was not a priority for NASCAR because they felt like in the Southeast, they had Bristol, they had Atlanta, they had other venues, Talladega, that they weren't, going to take away from them and give to Nashville. So for the longest time, Nashville had, hosted everything but a cup race. And then all of a sudden, the Renaissance, the Super Speedway came in. We thought that, might bring a cup race. It didn't. And then, suddenly the Speedway is shuttered. And then unexpectedly, well, maybe not unexpectedly, Nashville enjoys an incredible growth spurt.
Yep.
And I'm telling you right now, guys, this is another very important aspect of it. Country music became a national thing, a huge national thing.
Yep.
And generationally, the NASCAR drivers all love this city, coming here, because of the music, but just overall. And then, all of a sudden, 2 years ago, Dale Earnhardt Jr., Jeff Gordon all talked about, why not Nashville? And I'm shaking my head. I mean, I couldn't believe it. But essentially, what we saw was really the culmination of a miracle, because Nashville Superspeedway 2 years ago was on its way to becoming an antique mall.
Yep.
I mean, it just was. It was, it wasn't being used. It had been sold a couple of times, but they did a phenomenal job adding the extra seating. It was full. It was vibrant. It was awesome. It gave me chills. And the other thing was, when there was racing, whether it was IndyCar or anything else, the drivers hated the concrete surface. Mm-hmm. They just did. They like Nashville. They like everything else. But they weren't thrilled with the surface because they felt like it was a one-groove experience, which makes for a boring race. But we saw yesterday 3 wide, a lot of groups, getting together and and racing against each other on the track, and just the overall experience was unbelievable. They just did a fantastic job. You knew that the pre-race show and the entertainment was going to be first class.
Oh yeah.
But everybody wanted to be a part of the action. Brad Paisley co-hosted with Dale Jr. In the pre-race show, and NASCAR is all in. They're going to turn, obviously, the fairgrounds track into a boutique track, kind of like the NASCAR version of PNC Park in Pittsburgh, which is smaller capacity but very intimate. And, they're talking about a super speedway, being built in the Nashville area, which I just totally don't see, and that could happen long after, I've left this earth. But really cool that the Cup race came back, and Nashville responded big time. This is still a rabid racing market, always has been. Look at the ratings for NASCAR events. So I thought it was fantastic.
Yep, really well done. And I thought the atmosphere really all weekend long, but especially yesterday with the Cup Series race, was awesome. Kyle Larson gets the win yesterday. He has been dominant on the track.
He dominated that race.
I mean, he led for almost the whole time.
Yeah.
Yesterday was unbelievable.
260 out of 300 laps.
It was unbelievable to watch what he was able to do. Chase Elliott wins the first stage. But speaking of Chase, how about our own Chase McCabe on the PA at NASCAR? It's the Nashville Super Speedway. Bringing in Luke Combs on the PA system yesterday. Good stuff from Chase McCabe yesterday and all weekend long at Nashville Super Speedway as well. And we are off and running today here on Robby and Rexrode. Mark Howard is in for Joe today. Joe, last day of vacation. He will be back tomorrow. And one thing we've not gotten into very deep yet is the College World Series, and that was one of the stories of the weekend here locally. Both Vanderbilt and Tennessee in action. Things didn't go all that well for Tennessee. Vanderbilt with a dramatic win. We'll get to that coming up next. Taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game.
1-2, slow roller, it's through. Jason Gonzalez will win it in the bottom of the 12th, and what a night for the 9-hole hitter. Vanderbilt 7, Arizona 6.
And how does it feel to be able to get the walk-off hit in a huge moment like that?
It was great. It's just a dream come true to be here, be in this situation. We've all worked so hard to get to this moment, so it's a pretty special moment.
Big night for Vanderbilt on Saturday. They get it done in extra innings, 7-6 with a walk-off hit by Jason Gonzalez to win against Arizona. A 4-hour and 51-minute game on Saturday, the fourth longest game in the history of the College World Series. And Mark, that was one that was entertaining from start to finish. Kumar Rocker, by his standards, a little bit off on Saturday night, and Vanderbilt coming up with clutch hits. Gonzalez with a hit there. He had a homer earlier in the game. Carter Young, a big home run to give the Commodores the 6-5 lead at the time. It was a game really from start to finish that had a lot of entertainment value.
Yeah, you look at everything Vanderbilt did wrong. Kumar Rocker with a crazy first inning. He gives up, 2 unearned runs, really one well-hit ball. And then, Vanderbilt falls behind. 3 errors during the game. I mean, they were doing a lot of stuff uncharacteristic to what we've seen this year. But the thing about Vanderbilt is, they don't quit. They're not going to be psychologically, intimidated during the game or frustrated, by any failures. They're just going to keep coming at you. And up and down the batting order, they got big hits, culminated by Gonzalez, who's a guy who was inserted late in the season due to an injury.
Yep.
And really hit well. And Tim Corbin has kept him in there. And that's, sort of a tribute to the depth, that Corbs has and his ability to, have his finger on the pulse of his team and know who to put in and when. And, he absolutely did that. And, getting through, and Kumar was excellent after the first inning.
Yep.
Until the 6th or the 7th when he hit a batter and then gave up a home run. He had not allowed a player to reach base from the second inning, through the 7th inning, and then it kind of blew up on him again. Vandy fell behind, but then they came back. As you mentioned, the 3 M's, again, I thought performed marvelously. Maldonado coming in first, and then Luke Murphy, and then McIlvain. But they did give up that run in the 9th to tie it, and had a couple of good chances in extra innings, and including bases loaded and 1 out, and unable to score. And you're sitting there going, is it going to be one of these games? Because going through the losers bracket is a totally different experience.
Yep.
You got to play more. You really have to expend just about every bullet you have, with your pitching staff. And I don't think Corbs, was a fanatic about that, although it'll be interesting to see, how Friday's game is going to affect tonight's game against North Carolina State.
Yep, and you mentioned Kumar Rocker after the first inning. I mean, you've got errors in the first inning as well, and then he goes out and he retires 15 straight batters after that, and you're thinking to yourself, all right, he's settled in. He's making Arizona look pretty pedestrian out there, given, you're talking about a team coming in that had
and
a 330.
Gets 2 outs to start the 7th.
Yeah, you talk about a team coming into the game that had a 330 team batting average. I mean, it's unbelievable how well Arizona's been hitting the ball, and Rocker made them look pretty pedestrian throughout the middle part of that game. And then they're able to get some big hits in the 7th inning. And to your point, Vanderbilt just continues to claw their way back in there. And the base running threats that they have with Javier Vaz out there, Enrique Bradfield, the speed that they're able to bring to the table. I mean, there was one point in extra innings where Vaz was taking a leadoff. And you could tell it on the broadcast. He's completely leaning towards second base because he knows that he's quick enough to get back even if you throw over. Just the speed that they're able to bring to the table on the base path, it's so difficult for other teams to handle.
Well, but I also think, guys, that the underlying theme is, too, is how comfortable Vanderbilt is in games and situations like that.
Yep.
They prepare their whole season leading up to this for what they're going to see in Omaha. The tough schedule, going on the road against highly ranked teams and doing all that. So even though some of these guys don't have College World Series experience, they've still been in big games, high pressure, high leverage situations, and they will be undaunted when facing that. They might not always succeed, but they're not going to succumb to the pressure.
No, certainly not. And it looks like Carter Young is starting to get healthier and healthier. We talked about that with Tim Corbin last week, and he got some extra at-bats in practice and kind of a live scrimmage situation before they headed out to Omaha. And, of course, he suffered, the shoulder injury a few weeks ago and has found his way back in lineup. He's been an offensive threat all year long, but the last few weeks he's been trying to get that timing back, been trying to get that health back to a level where he can drive the ball with power. And obviously a big home run on Saturday night, a switch hitter. He's been such a huge part of their offense all season long. You know what you're going to get out of him defensively, and it's pretty solid for the most part every time he's out there. But if he can start driving the ball again and get back to that offensive pop that he's had all season long, that's going to be a pretty big weapon for Vanderbilt as they move forward here.
I don't know how the North Carolina State game is going to unfold. One of the criticisms of Vanderbilt during the regular season was that they did not have a definitive closer.
Yeah.
And this might sort of work in their favor. They've got so many arms out there that have been in high leverage situations that if he's got to use somebody else tonight, he's got Hugh Fisher, who's been there for 15 years, I think, and he's just got other guys that he can pull out of the bullpen.
Yep, and it's to your point about kind of being there and handling it. It's really amazing to watch kind of how the evolution of this Vanderbilt program has taken place. We know what Tim Corbin has been able to build, but it's funny to talk about Vanderbilt and say, they don't really need to win everything. Like the SEC regular season title, okay, you can win it, whatever. The tournament title, that's fine. But a lot of Vanderbilt fans, after a rough showing in Hoover, were just like, yeah, we don't really care. It's about Omaha. It's amazing that that program has gotten to this point where it's about Omaha, and you can see them start to build their game and really build, I guess, what they're working for and their poise for this moment. And I thought that came out in full display on Saturday against Arizona. Just to watch that kind of now be the standard for this Vanderbilt team, where we talked about this last week, being there 5 times in the last 10 years. That's so hard to do. It's so hard to get to this point as often as they've been able to do it in the past decade. And the kids that they've been able to recruit and just the makeup that this team has, that just seems to be the expectation at this point. And it's been pretty amazing to watch how they handle that. Of course, no surprise when you're led by Tim Corbin.
Yeah. And you can equate that to other things that we've seen in the NHL. The Blackhawks never cared, where they were seated.
Yep.
They just wanted to be in the tournament because they knew they could win from the 8th seed, to the 1. College basketball, there are teams that don't care if they win their conference tournaments because they know that the NCAAs is the most important thing. And that's pretty evident in highly successful programs.
So a great start for Vanderbilt. They'll be back at it tonight against NC State. Bit of a rougher start for Tony Vitello and the Tennessee Volunteers. When we come back, we will break down a Game 1 loss for the Vols. What's the path going to look like now that they've dropped Game 1 in the College World Series? How much of a chance do we give them as they move forward here throughout the rest of the tournament here in Omaha? We'll get to that coming up next. Right now, though, ESPN 94.9, make sure you're tuned in for that. It is the official English radio home of the Nashville Soccer Club. Be listening in on Wednesday night as Nashville SC returns to Nissan Stadium to face Toronto. Pregame starts at 7:15, and the match begins at 7:30. We'll be right back. Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Mark Howard, and today Ryan Porth here with you on this Monday morning in Nashville, Tennessee, discussing the College World Series. Vanderbilt big winners over the weekend against Arizona. Did not go as well for the Tennessee Vols. They're shut out yesterday in their first game of the College World Series against Virginia, losing 6-0. Now in an elimination game coming up tomorrow against Texas. So the battle of the UTs tomorrow in the elimination game against Texas. I believe the game tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Mark, I thought just a game yesterday from Tennessee where everything that we've seen out of this team, that we've liked about this team, especially from kind of a swagger standpoint, an attitude standpoint, when they're up at the plate, it just didn't feel like they had it yesterday. And it to me, kind of felt like a game and maybe a team that was in that moment for the first time and in the College World Series for the first time. And I thought maybe it got to him a little bit. And Tony Vitello, we're going to hear from him here in just a few minutes, talked about kind of lacking conviction yesterday, especially at the plate offensively, and that ended up costing the Vols. I thought just never really able to find their footing offensively. They did have, about 3 different instances where they had 2 runners on base with nobody out to begin an inning, and were just not able to hit them over at that point and get them in. Just an uncharacteristically rough day at the plate for Tennessee offensively, and it just didn't look like they were as comfortable as they've been in that setting throughout the regional and the super regional as well.
Exactly. I think they got swallowed up a little bit by the moment. I think, the first inning, they have first and third and nobody out, and I just thought they were going to go to town against Andrew Abbott of Virginia, and it just didn't happen. And I thought right then and there, it was a deflating moment for Tennessee. But, baseball is a game of dealing with failure, and surely they know that. So, we'll see what happens tomorrow. And it's amazing when you go to Omaha. You lose that first game, and all of a sudden, you're looking at a quick trip.
Yeah.
You're looking at almost a U-turn. So, we'll find out. Texas is really good. Mississippi State had 21 strikeouts yesterday, which is just unbelievable. But, Tennessee, Andrew Abbott, 6 really strong innings, struck out 10, worked in and out of trouble. There were a couple of line drives that were caught.
Yep.
And, Tennessee's just got to suck it up. Chad Dallas, was not the guy that we saw down the stretch. They were able, he gave up an early run, and then, they got to him a little bit later. 1-0 lead for Virginia turned into a 5-0. And let's see. Tennessee, you got to face a little adversity sometimes, and I'm sure Tony Vitello is telling them that 7 teams have won the national championship, taking the scenic route through the losers bracket. So it's happened before; it can happen again.
And just never really able to get going yesterday for the Vols offensively. You mentioned Andrew Abbott, who was, I thought, really good yesterday.
And then Matt Wyatt.
And then Matt Wyatt as well. We're really good on the mound for Virginia. And Tennessee offensively sputtering down the stretch. And when it was 6-0, you just knew at that point, you coming up in that 9th inning, and I could see it on the batters of Tennessee's face. It didn't feel like they had a chance at that point. And Tony Vitello discussed the loss for the Vols after the game and how they bounce back moving forward from here. Here's what Tennessee baseball coach Tony Vitello had to say.
Clearly, we got beat today in a few different facets. Andrew Abbott was outstanding. Chad Dallas gave us a good start to things, too. But Abbott was in and out of the zone and clearly effective. I thought there were some moments there, whether it be on the mound or at the plate, where we lacked conviction, and it cost us a little bit. And then, towards the end of the game, once the score wasn't the way we wanted, we kind of uncharacteristically, I don't know what's rolled over is not the right word, but kind of lost our edge a little bit, which has been so beneficial to us. So Vol fans deserve better, because I know they came out in big numbers and certainly have helped us get to this point too. But it wasn't like there wasn't some try hard out there and some preparation. If anything, maybe there was a little bit too much of that.
So how common do you think that is, and do you think that was the case for Tennessee, that maybe maybe trying to do a little bit too much up there at the plate at times.
Well, I think it's a brutally honest assessment by Vitello, and that's the way he's coached this team. But that's what's going to happen in baseball sometimes.
Yep.
You're going to run into a couple of hot pitchers, and let's see what happens. Next time against Texas. They're not going to see Texas as ace, but the Longhorns, came in as the number 3 seed.
Yep.
So they're obviously pretty good, but all these teams are good, and that's what Tennessee has to reckon with. They don't have that little bandbox of a stadium where everything goes out for a home run. So we'll see. I mean, obviously, the wind was blowing out at Ameritrade Stadium, and there were a lot of home runs, but there were some well-pitched games. It was weird. You saw on Friday a lot of runs, and then on Saturday, or rather on Sunday, you saw well-pitched games.
Yep.
So we'll see what happens.
And you would assume Tidwell probably going to be on the mound for the Vols coming up against Texas tomorrow at 1 o'clock. And you mentioned it. I mean, it's not like this hasn't been done before. 7 times have a national champion come through the losers bracket. Now, it's tougher on the pitching staff, and that's the one thing about Tennessee that you kind of worried about heading into this series. How much depth do they have at pitching? Vanderbilt's got some decent depth as well. Tennessee, a little bit more unproven in that area. That's what you worry about as you move forward here. That's why I thought it was pretty critical for them to win in Game 1. And you heard Vitello talk about Chad Dallas there. I thought he was okay, but certainly not the Chad Dallas that we've seen coming down the stretch, and certainly in the regional and super regional as well. So that pitching depth for Tennessee about to get tested in a big way starting tomorrow against Texas, because that's what you run into when you get into the losers bracket. It's going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into your bullpen at that point.
Well, Dallas came into the game 11-1, and they were I think Tennessee was really counting on a victory. So now you resort to Plan B, and that's what happens when you go to Omaha. Everybody's good, so a good test for the Vols tomorrow.
And just you think back at that game, 2 runners on with no outs in the first, in the 5th, in the 6th as well. And you mentioned they hit a couple line drives just right at people, and sometimes that's just the name of the game in baseball. But you got to find a way to move runners over at that point. I thought, and this was kind of something that people were talking about on Twitter in the Vanderbilt game as well, wasn't a whole lot of small ball this weekend in the College World Series. And we've seen that throughout baseball as well. Not a lot of bunts, not a lot of trying to move runners over that way. I think that's just a larger baseball thing at this point, where small ball, that's becoming a lost art.
Well, Vanderbilt definitely bunts a lot.
They do.
They run. Corbs can beat you a lot of different ways. They can beat you with the home run, and most of the guys, are able to bunt. Rodriguez did not bunt.
He did not
move the runners, along. So, I'm sure Corbs reminded him of that. But by and large, you're right. I mean, most teams rely on the 3-run homer and strong pitching, and that's just sort of the way it is. But that's why Vanderbilt, is the favorite to win the national championship, because there are a lot of different ways they can beat you. And with Jack Leiter pitching today against a really good NC State team, if they get into a situation where they're going to play for 1 run, Corbin's not afraid to do that.
We knew that Tennessee was going to show up in terms of the fan base being in Omaha, and they did. I mean, some of the videos they put out on social media of the fans kind of walking the team out of the team hotel, there's a ton of orange up in Omaha. What have kind of been your thoughts on watching Tennessee get to this point, and how big, if they're able to kind of rebound here against Texas and stay alive in this tournament, how big is this situation for both Vanderbilt and Tennessee in terms of college baseball and the popularity in this state continuing to build? How big a deal can this be if Tennessee is able to stay alive here in Omaha?
Tennessee's fan base is amazing. Yeah, and of course, we know what football means
Sure.
To Rocky Top. But make no mistake about it, if they're in the NCAA tournament, remember they reached the regional final a few years ago, and it was in St. Louis, and Vols fans overran that place.
Yep.
It used to be that women's basketball was, but when Pat Summitt's teams got into an NCAA tournament, the volunteer army would show up and be as rabid as they would, on a Saturday afternoon against Alabama. And baseball's the same thing. Tennessee, Knoxville, they have great fans. And if the team's winning, they'll show up. I'm not saying they're front runners. That's not really fair. But if the team wins, they will show up for a big event.
Well, they're just dying for a winner at this point.
They'll travel and everything else. And listen, I hope Vitello stays at Tennessee. I think he will. I think there are too many compelling reasons for him to stay. He can build his own legacy. He's going to get the facilities that he wants. And he's done so phenomenally well in such a short time that it's going to be fun to have Tennessee and Vanderbilt really good in baseball. It's going to heat up the rivalry. It's gonna make that a tough ticket whenever they play, wherever they play. And it's kind of interesting. Having Vanderbilt fans, you saw a lot of black and gold at the Tennessee game. I don't know if they were necessarily rooting for the Vols, but they were there. And that I'm sure we'll see James Franklin at some point. But I think it's neat, Robbie. I really do. I think that college baseball has gotten so much bigger, the last 10 years. And Vanderbilt has become such a vibrant presence in this community. I mean, there is so much youth baseball. Dads who are normally, helicopter know-it-all dads for their kids' leagues just swoon when Tim Corbin walks into the room.
Yep.
And that's the popularity of Vanderbilt baseball. Corbin is a guy who just doesn't seem to do anything wrong. He just always knows the right thing to do, whether it's, connecting with the fan base, recruiting, whatever. And they've just become a huge part of the sports landscape here, where 20 years ago we kind of, barely noticed them.
Just Tennessee, all they need now is a whistler to go along with it, just like Vanderbilt.
God. Always hope for that foul ball.
He was he's back at it again on Saturday, all game long.
Please go away.
When we come back, we'll continue to take your thoughts on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. We'll get back into the NASCAR conversation as well. What do we think of this weekend for NASCAR in Nashville, and how does NASCAR kind of connect to that next generation of fans here in the Nashville area? We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Mark Howard, Ryan Porth here with you on this Monday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. A big weekend in the world of sports, including NASCAR coming to town this weekend. It was a fun weekend. I knew people that were out there all weekend long in RV campers hanging out at the Nashville Superspeedway. That's a long, hot weekend, Mark Howard.
Yeah, it is. I guess to each his own. But that's great. I mean,
shower free.
Yeah. Well, listen. But what a great visual yesterday. And we haven't seen a lot of instances of fans in the stands filled to capacity.
Yep.
Since the pandemic. So that was a great sight. And the race was one-sided and all that, but just the Cup coming back to Nashville was unbelievable, and to many of us, I didn't think I'd ever see it. I'll be honest with you, and it's amazing how and we've learned this either through the pandemic or anything else about so many myths were busted through that. College football scheduling. Oh, we schedule years in advance.
Yeah.
We can't change anything. How about BYU and Coastal Carolina?
2 weeks out.
2 weeks out, like 2 days out.
2 days out. Yeah.
So you saw that, and then I never thought for the longest time NASCAR had 100 reasons why the Cup was not coming to Nashville. Well, if Dover wants to do it, if they want to move one of their races. Geographically, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And then all of a sudden, NASCAR was having trouble with low ratings, low attendance, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Jeff Gordon and a few other drivers. Listen, I remember Bill Elliott coming in, and Chase Elliott was really in favor of it, and Chase and Dale Jr. Were two of the people involved in in NASCAR, even though Dale's essentially retired.
Yep.
But they were really beating the drum for Nashville. Their dads raced here. They wanted to go back to the fairgrounds. Initially, a lot of the drivers, my experience covering racing here at the Super Speedway, whether it was IndyCar, whether it was the trucks, whether it was at that time the Busch Series, drivers didn't really love the track. They loved the venue, they liked the market and all that, but they weren't thrilled about the track. It was by and large one groove, which made for boring racing, but we didn't see that yesterday. And I thought that was a big part of the entertainment factor because it's going to be at the Super Speedway. At least I don't know what the timeline is, but to see the Super Speedway back up and really looking great, they did a great job there.
Yeah, they did. I mean, it looked awesome yesterday. The TV broadcast part of it looked great as well. And we talked about kind of leading into this. You mentioned the ratings for NASCAR here have always been strong. There's always been a passionate fan base for NASCAR here. My question has been, all right, I remember growing up, obviously the days of Dale Earnhardt racing, Jeff Gordon. I mean, the heyday back in the mid to late 90s, early 2000s, that's when I was a young kid and I was watching NASCAR, and I just haven't since then. And look, Dale Earnhardt had a lot to do with that.
Well,
I'll admit that. But how do you get kind of that next generation of fans? I think it's something NASCAR has been struggling with. I think it's something they've been trying to figure out. So as you look at NASCAR coming into Nashville, how big of a deal do you think that could be for kind of this next generation that live here? And what do you think NASCAR has to do maybe to attract a younger fan base as they move forward?
One thing that NASCAR doesn't have, and I don't know how big an obstacle it's going to be, but when I was covering racing, the fairgrounds was more or less the AAA affiliate, for the Cup.
Yep.
I mean, you had, Darrell Waltrip, who obviously, didn't grow up in Tennessee, grew up in Owensboro, Kentucky. But he and Michael, came through here. Darrell, more so. But, during the NASCAR season, at a certain point, I was covering Darrell. I was covering Sterling Marlin, Bobby Hamilton, and a host of others. When he was racing Jeremy Mayfield, before his career, unfortunately, became, derailed.
Yep.
But there were so many different Bobby Jr. There were just so many different drivers that came through the fairgrounds. The Green brothers. I mean, there were tons, and that just doesn't exist anymore because there's a different way of finding and developing drivers. Unfortunately, I don't think it's ever going to come back to the way that it was. But that's one part of it. But I still think that the appeal of NASCAR will fill the fairgrounds up or the super speedway up. This market was hungry for cup racing, and they got it, and they showed up.
Yeah, they showed up in a big way, and Kyle Larson dominating the Cup Series race yesterday. You had the Truck Series as well, racing on Friday. Just a great weekend of racing here. I'll admit, I watched the entire race yesterday, and that's the first time I've watched a NASCAR race probably since 2003. It was.
I always watched the
excited.
Daytona 500, but I watched the whole race too. Mike Alexander, another driver out of here.
Yeah,
his family, of course, in the car business, but Mike, had a really promising career before he crashed in a Christmas race off season, and he was never quite the same again. And unfortunately, his Cup career ended.
Yep. So we'll see what this does for the popularity of NASCAR here locally with younger fans. But I thought, the geographical thing has never really made all that much sense to me. Like, I get it, you've got Bristol close by and you've got Atlanta, and there's all these different things, but I'm glad that they finally wised up and got back. And you mentioned the drivers, and that's a big part of it, and how much they wanted to come here to Nashville. But there's a rabid fan base here. There always has been for NASCAR, and I'm glad that they finally wised up and got back here.
Well, NASCAR had to realign its thinking.
Yep.
And I think they realized that country music and NASCAR are intertwined. They should be intertwined. And what better place than Nashville to do it? Again, the drivers all wanted to come here, which is a big thing. And they figured out a way to make it work out. Like I said, for so long, Nashville chased NASCAR and couldn't get it done. And then the NASCAR Awards started, basing itself out of Nashville and talk again about Nashville becoming a venue. And it just made sense. And again, in a sport that's had trouble with ratings and attendance, I didn't see either of those yesterday. I'll be interested to see what the numbers are going to be. It was on NBC Sports Network, but still, I thought it was a pretty good indicator that Nashville is still a pretty hot racing market.
Yep, God bless those people yesterday too. It was a warm one yesterday out at the track. So, got out there, stayed hydrated, watched a good race yesterday at the Nashville Super Speedway. Nashville SC fans, join ESPN 94.9 tonight from 7 to 8 p.m. for NSC Backstage featuring Nashville SC players and coaches. NSC Backstage brought to you by Camarena Tequila, the official tequila of Nashville SC. When we come back, we're going to switch gears. We'll get into the Titans and get Mark's thoughts on the offseason moves that have been made, the Titans offense coming in to this season. And I'll throw out this question. Has Ryan Tannehill gotten enough credit for the success of the Titans over the last couple of years? We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode, live from the Wholesaling Studios, powered by RumbleOn.com. Here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in. Hour number 2 of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Mark Howard, Ryan Porth here with you on this Monday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Taking your thoughts on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Talking Titans. And Mark, obviously a big deal with Julio Jones coming into this offense. That has set expectations pretty sky high for this Titans team and for this offense as well. But a popular reaction nationally when the Julio Jones trade was made was, oh, man, look at that offense. They've got A.J. Brown. They've got Julio Jones. They've got Derrick Henry. Oh, and then there's Ryan Tannehill. That was very popular among the national media and the fan bases at large in the NFL. Do you think Ryan Tannehill's gotten enough credit for what he's been able to do here? And if not, how do you think he changes that narrative? Can he change that narrative given the rest of the pieces that are around him on this offense?
I think the narrative has changed slowly. And you know, I think the narrative is irrelevant. I really do. Because Ryan Tannehill, I'm sure Ryan Tannehill, wants the credit that he has coming to him. I think the Titans have shown him the love. I think the fans in this market have shown him the love. Maybe nationally he doesn't get it the way that he wants it. But, by and large, the Titans always seem to be overlooked. The view from 30,000 feet is, they got Julio Jones, pretty much a surefire, Hall of Famer, when his career is over. But let's see what he does. Is he diminished? We don't know that yet. But if Julio Jones is anywhere close to what we've seen, with A.J. Brown, they should be pretty good. But, Titans fans have other questions. What about Dez Fitzpatrick? What about the tight end position? Is Ferkser going to be enough? So on defense, of course, you're going to have a relatively young secondary. That's just going to be inevitable. We want to know about Caleb Farley. How good is he going to be? So at some point, you're going to have Farley and Elijah Molden, two rookies out there at corner, it seems like. But what about Bud Dupree? Is he going to fortify the pass rush? What about Weaver?
Yep.
Weaver's another guy that could really help them, along with Harold Landry. So, a lot of questions about the Titans, but I think the fan base was energized and excited by the addition of Julio Jones.
So when you look at the addition of Julio Jones to this offense, we know the firepower with Derrick Henry in the backfield, obviously A.J. Brown ascending on a yearly basis as a receiver in this league. You mentioned that Julio Jones obviously has been an outstanding player, a surefire Hall of Famer when his playing days are done. If he is 70, 80% of the Julio Jones we've seen in Atlanta, it's going to be a pretty good pickup for the Titans at this point. So what do you think expectations should be for Ryan Tannehill this year? He's been awesome since he's come in and took over the job as a starting quarterback. And you see this graphic tossed around all the time comparing some of the numbers since he's been here to Patrick Mahomes and how they are very similar on that front. Now, I don't think anybody would confuse Ryan Tannehill for Patrick Mahomes at this point, but as you look at the weapons he now has at his disposal, what should the expectations be for Ryan Tannehill heading into his third season here with the Titans?
He should be able to get this team into the playoffs. His numbers have really been phenomenal since he's been here. And I think that people now realize that he's not the guy that he was in Miami. That he's been put. He is an example of being put in the right situation, and it's amazing how you get different results. But one thing about Tannehill is he was second in the NFL throwing the long ball. He was 8 of 16 on passes over 25 yards, and now suddenly as Julio Jones, who's a bona fide deep threat, stands to reason those numbers should be pretty good this year. So there are just a lot of reasons, where suddenly he's got maybe the best receiving core he's ever had, although not having Jonnu Smith at tight end, bothers me. But I think he should be able to put out similar numbers from what we've seen the last 2 years, as long as Derrick Henry's healthy and things are working the way they should.
So do you think another move could be coming at the tight end position? You mentioned Ferkser right now. Looks like he's the number one guy. They've got about $7 million in cap space at this point. You've still got, maybe a kicker to sign along the way, although they're acting like this is the competition right now at the kicking position. Joe still believes Gostkowski's coming in at some point, but we'll have to wait and see on that front. Still some moves to be made, but do you think another tight end could be brought into the table at some point here in the next few weeks leading into training camp if you're John Robinson and the Titans?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to break the bank, though. They might get a vet, off of waivers. That wouldn't surprise me at all. I don't see, JR making a trade. But, beyond that, as far as the kicker is concerned, I agree with Joe because, having a bad kicking game is like having a bad bullpen. It bleeds over into the way you coach, and it can really undermine your season. And if he has Gostkowski in his back pocket, if need be, then that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I'd be really surprised if they didn't add to the tight end position.
Let's go to our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Josh in Kentucky texting in. I think there's way too much worrying going on about the tight end position for the Titans. I know it's an important position in today's NFL, but I don't think we are giving Ferkser enough credit. Are we disrespecting Anthony Ferkser?
Anthony Ferkser, believe me, when Ferkser first came on the scene, he was one of my training camp crushes. But I don't think he is a top-level target. I could be wrong. He's not obviously God's gift to blocking. So when he's out there, they know why he's out there. And that was the one thing with Jonnu. Jonnu had become a pretty solid blocker. So when he was out there, he could be out there as a blocker. He could be out there as a receiver. So I'm not dissing Ferkser. I just think they need to get a little more dynamic at that position. And I know that Rexrode had his eyes on Zach Ertz.
Oh, yeah.
And it just it's not going to happen. But that would have been nice. But then again,
I think you'll take Julio Jones.
I'll take
right?
Julio Jones.
That's right. Well, that's the thing too. Like if Ferkser ends up being the guy, that's what I worry about, and a lot of Titans fans I think worry about too. Is are you too predictable with Ferkser and Swaim? Like if Ferkser's on the field, do you know that it's going to be a passing situation at that point? The Titans have kind of downplayed that and said, they had the assistant coaches talking last week and said, Ferkser can block a whole lot better than y'all think he can block, and Swaim can run routes a whole lot better than y'all think he can run routes. So the Titans have downplayed that a little bit. How legit of a concern is that for you, that Ferkser may be a little bit too one-dimensional?
I don't disagree with what they're saying. I mean, Ferkser, is no tackling dummy. Let's get that out. And the media tends to pigeonhole these guys, and don't leave room often for improvement. And that has been the case with Ferkser. He's a guy who has come on, has become a lot more confident with his hands, and obviously as a blocker has gotten a little bit better. And the other part of it is too, I don't really buy into the whole predictability thing because to me the NFL is an execution league. It's not a trick 'em league. You trick them every now and then, but if you're using a lot of trick plays, that means you don't have a whole lot of confidence in your football team. So that really doesn't bother me a whole lot.
Let's go back to the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Got a text that says, we never used Jonnu Smith as a weapon last year anyways. He hardly ever got the ball. We'll miss his blocking, but our passing game will not be hurting because of his absence. Well, I would point out that part of the reason he didn't get the ball is because Taylor Lewan went down, and he had to stay in and block a little bit more. Go back and watch Jonnu Smith the first 5 games of the year. It's a pretty good weapon for this Titans team, especially in the red zone. I mean, he was putting up touchdowns every game. So I hear you. You look at the straight-up production for Jonnu Smith, and it's not like we're talking about an elite level tight end here. Johnny Smith, I think the Titans know how good he is and what he brought to the table.
I think Johnny Smith is going to put up big numbers for the Patriots. I thought it was interesting how valued he was, going into free agency. And, yeah, I didn't think the Titans threw to him enough. I thought he was underutilized. But, yeah, that was sort of the situation he was in with Lewan going down last year, and that was sort of the circumstance they had to deal with.
I look at this offense right now with Henry, with Brown, and with Julio Jones in the fold. Number one, I think it slots everybody where they need to be. I feel a lot better about Josh Reynolds as a 3 as I do a number 2. As you look at the rest of this receiving room and the weapons that Tannehill has at his disposal, I feel pretty confident the top 4 are pretty set. I mean, you've got Brown, Jones, Reynolds, and you drafted Dez Fitzpatrick. Those 4 guys are going to make the team. As you look at the rest of the wide receiver room, whether they keep 5 or whether they keep 6, how do you think this is going to shake out? Who would you say might be the leaders in the clubhouse in the moment for those last couple of spots at wide receiver?
I don't even know if if the coaching staff knows yet. They might have seen, from the OTAs. Nick Westbrook-Ikine, was a guy who contributed a little. Cam Batson, is still out there. You got guys like Cody Hollister and people like that. They signed, Fred Brown.
Yep.
But the other part of this is, I want to go back to something that you said. Josh Reynolds reminds me of Nick Bonino. When Bonino came in, everybody said, second-line center. He was not a second-line center, but he was a good third-line center.
Yep.
And that is sort of the case with Reynolds. Not a good number 2 receiver, but a good number 3 receiver. So I like that. Sometimes you just can't, pound that square peg, into that round hole. But that's going to be one of the storylines. Who's going to emerge after those top 3? How fast will Fitzpatrick show himself?
Yeah.
We're still not totally sure, what the Titans are getting in him. And then after that, what about the guys who served in complementary roles for them? And that, John Robinson constantly churns the bottom of his roster. So he's been really very good at coming up with guys who can contribute. And I think you'll see 1 or 2 of those in camp this year.
We'll continue the discussion on the Titans offense when we come back. Taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Mark Howard, Ryan Porth here with you on this Monday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Discussing the Tennessee Titans, taking your thoughts on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. So, Mark, this is the first time we've had you on this show since the addition of Julio Jones, and with that has come very high expectations for the Titans with their fan base. We've had a lot of people on our text line say it's time for a Super Bowl or bust for this team, which I always say, okay, well, that's a pretty high bar heading into a season. In your mind, with Julio Jones coming in, with the questions that I still think are aplenty on the defensive side of the ball, what are fair expectations for this Titans team as they move ahead to training camp coming up here in a few weeks?
They should, in my opinion, win the AFC South. And they should, it's hard for me to sit here and say Super Bowl or bust. When you've got Kansas City, a presumptive dynasty, a team that's absolutely loaded. Look at the AFC now. You've got Buffalo, who I still think is an emerging power. You've got Kansas City. You've got Baltimore. I mean, you've got the Browns. They should be the Titans should be in that heavyweight division. Beyond that, a lot of times these games, turn into a crapshoot. It comes down to a turnover or something at the end. I think you look at some of the stats. 1 year, a totally useless kicking game, and they make it to the AFC Championship.
Hardly used them at the end of the year. Yeah.
Last year, their sack numbers are at a historic low, and they still make it. They win a playoff game, and they lost to Baltimore, a team that they had absolutely dominated. But I think this is a team that once again, should go to the second or third round of the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obvious to me. John Robinson, it feels like he believes his window is now, and why not? You've got Derrick Henry as the best running back in the league. You've got Tannehill that's come in and played incredibly well on offense since you've made him the starting quarterback. This offense, it should be lethal. I mean, and we talked about this last week. I think there's a lot of pressure on Todd Downing now. I mean, there's pressure anyway. You're coming in and taking over for Arthur Smith. Those are some pretty gigantic shoes to fill at that point.
Arthur Smith leaving is no small thing.
Oh, no.
And nothing against Todd Downing. You can sit here and trash Todd Downing, but I always believe it's such a players' league. I've seen Greg Williams, have great years, with his defenses, and I've seen him have terrible years. And it's, basically based on the personnel that he was given. And, Downing definitely, has a pretty loaded offense. How creative can he be? The thing about Arthur was, Arthur had a beautiful mind, when it came, when it came to being a play caller. And that's something you can't really teach. So it'll be interesting to see, how Downing does, after, watching Arthur, for a couple of years. That's part of it. But the other part of it is, you look at the Titans in years, where they were Super Bowl contenders. The year they went to the Super Bowl, they had a pretty dominating defense.
Yep.
They had a balanced offense. It was a different time, of course. They didn't put up the offensive numbers you would see now. But, I wouldn't say they're a Super Bowl favorite. They're probably in the second tier, when it comes to Super Bowl contenders, in the AFC. I think, Kansas City and Buffalo, are definitely, two that are going to be favored. There are other teams that I think have a chance to be dangerous. I think the Chargers are going to be an interesting team to watch. So I can go all over the place. Don't count the Steelers out, after what happened last year. And again, the Browns are ascending. I don't know if you put them in that second tier or that first tier.
How much of a believer are you in the Colts with Carson Wentz coming in?
I'll believe it when I see it.
I'm the same way.
I don't think it's just as easy as, Frank Reich sprinkling fairy dust on him and it's all better. Listen, I thought Carson Wentz, I always said Carson Wentz, when he was playing well, was the quarterback the Titans wanted Marcus Mariota to be.
Yep.
Now, the Carson Wentz that I saw last year was just shocking. I don't know what happened, but that's what happens sometimes when your quarterback coach and your offensive coordinator get changed. Stuff like that, can affect a quarterback's performance. But
well, that's why it was so interesting, when Julio came in here, just looking at the odds makers out there. I mean, Indy was the favorite before that move, and now on some places it's kind of even money between the Titans and the Colts. And there's a lot of talk about Carson Wentz coming in and kind of revitalizing his career with Frank Reich. And look, maybe he does. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to play out with Carson Wentz and Indy. But I look at this division right now, I think the Titans are the clear favorite in the AFC South based on that offensive firepower that they have. Now, we'll see on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, it was awful last year. It's hard for me to believe they're going to be as bad defensively as they were a year ago, but maybe they will be. We'll have to wait and see on that front. But I'm surprised that as many people are still in love with the Colts as they are in this division right now.
The Colts are loaded.
They are.
Everywhere except quarterback.
I know. That's a pretty important position, though.
It is. It is. The Titans, I thought, made some good additions to the D-line with Autry.
Yep.
I think he's definitely going to be a huge presence. I think this is a year where hopefully Jeffrey Simmons breaks out. They need him to be dominant. So, there are a lot of components there. And I think the Titans' defense will be better. I just think the personnel is better. So, we'll see what the numbers are.
Ryan Porth, as you look at this Titans team heading into this season, as training camp's now a few weeks out, what do you think fair expectations are? We've caught up in the Julio hoopla, the hype going along with Titans fans. What do you think fair expectations should be with this group with Julio Jones coming into the fold?
To win the division, and depending on which side of the bracket that you land on, I mean, this is your window to win. This isn't your window to just get to the playoffs and do nothing. This is your window to win. So, if you end up on the opposite side of KC, if KC's the 1 seed and you get the 2 or 3, then win the division and get to the AFC title game. And, I mean, it's hard to sit here and say it's Super Bowl or bust. It really is. But that doesn't mean that the Julio trade may not, have worked out. Sure. If he comes in and makes this offense that much better and this team that much better, but they still lose to KC in the AFC title game, I don't know if you can sit back and say that the trade was not worth it at that point.
Well, I mean, look, beating Kansas City is a pretty high bar. I think we figured that out the last couple of years. It's a pretty high bar. Patrick Mahomes is unbelievable, and that, for the foreseeable future, is going to be the mountain you're going to have to get over in the AFC. But look, I look at this team with the offense that they've got coming in. There's no reason to me this team couldn't be, one of the top 3 contenders in the AFC. I mean, I think they're right there in that conversation. Now, to Mark's point, there are a lot of teams you feel good about in the AFC. You've got Cleveland. Baltimore still in the mix as well. Obviously, Buffalo as well and what they were able to do a year ago. So there's a lot of teams that are right there. But if this offense works out the way the Titans are envisioning, I think you're going to be productive enough on that side of the ball where you're going to put yourself right in that conversation.
Yeah, I feel like the expectations might be different if you were in the NFC, but you're not, obviously. But I think the NFC is just a lot more wide open, for sure. And, one of the criticisms that the Titans as a team has gotten here in the last, really since midseason last year is the defense. And last year, rightfully so, it was atrocious. But people are saying, they don't have a defense. How do you know?
Yeah.
They changed like half the defense. They have Jim Schwartz added to the staff to help the defense. So I don't think we really know whether the Titans have a defense or not this year.
When we come back, we'll take your thoughts on the Titans. What are your expectations for this team as training camp sits here a few weeks away? Let us know on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. This is Robby and Rexrode. Mark Howard in today as well on ESPN 1025, The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Mark Howard, Ryan Porth here with you on this Monday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Talking Titans, taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. Ron on the text line says, Ben Roethlisberger will not finish the 2021 season, and Mason Rudolph will be the Steelers' new quarterback. Ben retires. This guy was shot-putting balls last year, and he'll be skipping rocks this year. I totally disagree with Mark on Pittsburgh making the playoffs.
Well, underestimate Pittsburgh at your peril.
They tend to end up in the playoffs quite frequently.
And they've got, when healthy, they've got a lot of weapons on that offense.
Najee Harris coming into the fold as well.
Yeah, and I agree with him. I want to see how well Roethlisberger throws the ball. But remember, this team started out, like 11-0, 12-0?
11-0, yep.
Yeah.
Pretty good start to the season.
Not a good finish.
Yeah. But still a lot of talent. Look, I think Mike Tomlin, really good coach as well.
Yeah.
So to your point, underestimate the Pittsburgh Steelers at your own peril. So, Mark, as you look, we're talking about expectations for this Titans team with Julio coming in. We've talked a lot about the offensive side of things. Defensively, Shane Bowen, I guess technically his first technical year as defensive coordinator, but really year 2 under Shane Bowen as well. How much different do you think this defense is going to look? And as you evaluate the changes they've made up front with Bud Dupree coming in, with Danico Autry coming in as well, if they can stay healthy in those areas, how much more do you like this version of the pass rush? And what do you think having guys like Autry and Bud Dupree next to him can do for a Jeffrey Simmons in the pass rush?
Well, I would also argue, Robbie, that one of the other significant additions to the defense is Jim Schwartz.
Yep.
You know, he's not just there to sweep the floors. And I think, Schwartz, and I haven't talked to Schwartzy since he's come back to town. And, when he was with the Titans, I had a really good relationship with him. I like him a lot. I'm a huge fan of his. He's an unbelievably smart guy. You want to talk about the smartest guy in the room? Just about every room Jim's been in, he's been the smartest guy in the room. I think the changing nature of defenses in the NFL is a very important component here. The Titans aren't always going to be a 3-4 team. They're going to be a team with shifting defensive fronts. Sometimes they're going to be a 4-man front, maybe even a 5-man front. Schwartzy wasn't a big blitzer and has never really been one, as a defensive coordinator. So it'll be interesting to see his influences on Shane Bowen's defense. But he's there for a reason. He might not be there to be the coordinator, but you're crazy if you don't tap, from his, incredible reservoir of knowledge. So, the Jim Schwartz effect will be very interesting. And I don't think we really even know yet, what kind of looks we're going to see from the Titans defense, how aggressive they're going to be. With Schwartzy, Schwartzy always wanted to be death, by 1,000 paper cuts.
Yep.
You weren't going to have the Buddy Ryan, load him up, go after the quarterback defense. So I'm not sure yet what we're going to see from the Titans defense. Schwartzy was pretty much a 4-man front guy. Theoretically, the Titans are a 3-man front defense, but I don't really buy that because I think that's a thing that evolves and isn't necessarily true snap to snap. So I think when we talk about the defense, we need to speak in measured tones because we're not sure what we're looking at yet.
Well, certainly we're not, and I do, though. I look at this defense, and with Schwartz coming in, we've already heard it from some Titans fans. Maybe he should just be the defensive coordinator and Shane Bowen, and we know that's not going to happen at this point. But I was talking about this last week with Joe. I mean, I can envision a scenario where, with all the different moving parts, with the young secondary that they have, we'll see what happens with Caleb Farley and if he's available to go in week 1. But you've got Janoris Jenkins coming in. I mean, there's a lot of changeover in that secondary. This is a totally different secondary outside of Kevin Byard and Amani Hooker stepping into, a starting role. Christian Fulton, we don't know what we have there. I mean, we've seen him. He's been injured. This is a completely different secondary that they've got this year. I can see maybe this taking some time, the first 3, 4, 5 weeks of the season, to really get going back there and see what you truly have. And if that happens and the defense struggles, even if the Titans are winning games like we saw a year ago, I think there could be a lot of noise on Shane Bowen from this Titans fan base.
I don't know. I don't know. I just don't see them bringing Schwartzy in, to sort of be looking over Bowen's shoulder.
Yeah.
And I don't want to speak ill of Greg Williams because I wasn't in the room. But the problem was when Mike Munchak brought him in, there became a little bit of a confusion, over who was really running the show. Greg was a very strong personality. Jerry Gray had played for him, but even the players said they weren't really sure, who the shot caller was. I don't think that's going to be a problem here. I don't think Jim Schwartz really cares. Schwartzy could get a defensive coordinator position in 5 minutes if he wanted to. He was on track to get another shot as a head coach. So I don't really see that happening. I don't see him coming here, trying to gaslight, Shane Bowen. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think Vrabel would let it happen. But I think he can be a valuable asset. And the way the NFL is going now, with the ever-shifting fronts, with more athletic, smaller athletic players, being out there on the defensive side, being able to blitz, and also cover, you want those guys. So it'll be interesting to see how the Titans utilize their personnel.
Speaking of the personnel, Kevin Byard last year, a bit of an uncharacteristically rough year for him. He's talked about that, how he did not meet his standards of play last year, but a lot going wrong in front of him as well, and not much pass rush to speak of on that front. And I don't care who you have in the secondary. When you're not generating enough pass rush, it's difficult to cover in this league. As you look at Kevin Byard heading into this season, with what I just mentioned, there's a lot of changeover in that secondary, and he's going to have to be the guy kind of back there directing traffic. What did you think of the way he played last year? Is there concern that maybe Kevin Byard has lost a step heading into this year?
I agree with what you said previously. I think it was an absolute bleep show in front of him. I think he tried to do too much at times. I'm not worried about Kevin Byard at all. To be honest with you, I think he'll recalibrate a little bit and understand that he just can't do, too much. That you just play within yourself, and you'll be fine. So, of all the guys that you might be concerned about on the Titans defense, in my opinion, Kevin Byard is not one of them.
Let's go to our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Ben texting in says, Titans and Colts will come down to the wire for the division once again. These two teams are so close, and neither has distanced themselves from each other. More love for the Colts. Ben loves the Colts.
Well, yeah, that is, not really a reach. The Colts are going to be good.
Yep.
I'm just not sure how good Carson Wentz is going to be. And, we're not going to find that out till he gets on the field. But that's one of the great mysteries leading into this season. And it's going to really test the coaching abilities of Frank Reich. I mean, essentially, Carson Wentz is Humpty Dumpty, and can they put him back together again?
Right. Yep, it's going to be interesting to see whether or
that
not
fall off the wall
was
pretty ugly.
Yeah, it was a pretty rough one. Off the wall for Carson Wentz. I know. I look at the rest of the AFC, talking about expectations for the Titans. A lot of it's going to come down to the defensive side, obviously. But to your point, I mean, this defense, I don't think we know what it is yet. Well, there's a lot of concern, and we've gotten it ever since Julio Jones has been added to this group on our text line about the defense. But there's been so much changeover, not only from, a coaching standpoint with Jim Schwartz coming in, but also a personnel standpoint too. I mean, I don't think we really truly have any idea yet what this defense is going to look like. And honestly, Mark, just based on sheer probability, it's difficult for me to imagine the pass rush is going to be as bad as it was a year ago. I mean, that is historically bad. You would think there would at least be some improvement there on that side from the pass rushing standpoint.
Well, thank God Vic Beasley isn't there.
Well, there's that.
And Jadeveon Clowney, he
seems to be
didn't do
excited
a
to be
whole
in
lot to
Cleveland.
me. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's going to be better. I'm telling you, you keep hearing out of Pittsburgh, and granted, he's got some, legal issues right now, but Weaver, a lot of people really like. I don't know if he's going to be an impact player, but I think he's going to contribute. Dupree getting over that knee injury, I don't know when we're going to see him on the field, and that to me always becomes an issue. That is one thing I am worried about. As far as Harold Landry, I just think Harold Landry played way too many snaps last year, and I think that's pretty much the consensus of everybody around the Titans. So I think if these guys can contribute, I think less is more with Harold Landry.
I do too. Yeah, I mean, he's like 94% of the snaps last year. It's unbelievable how many snaps he played on that front. When we come back, we'll continue to take your thoughts on the Titans on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. And we'll also gauge the temperature of the Titans fan base. How excited are they about this team? When's the last time we've seen a Titans fan base excited to this level about this team? We'll talk about that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Go to theGameNashville.com to check out Nashville's best deals. Deals happening now include $50 Bad Axe Throwing Nashville gift cards for only $25, a $30 Boom Boss Craft Pizza and Tap House gift card for only $15, and buy one, get one free for Beach Bend Park and Splash Lagoon. $20 Grain and Berry gift card as well for only $10. You can check those out and get yours now while they last at theGameNashville.com. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Mark Howard, Ryan Porth here with you on this Monday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. We'll be joined by Corey Curtis from News 2 to begin the 8 o'clock hour. We'll get into the Titans and the College World Series a little bit with Corey Curtis as well, coming up here in about 15 minutes or so. Right now, talking Titans, taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. So, Mark, you have covered the Titans for a long time. You have seen some really good teams. You have seen some really bad teams come in and out of here as well, and everything in between with the fan base and the excitement level. Where do you kind of put your finger on the excitement level for this team after the Julio Jones trade heading into this season, and how does it compare to back in the heyday with McNair and George and Frank Wycheck, D. Mace, all these different players that are so beloved in the history of the Titans franchise? Where do you kind of think they are right now in terms of the excitement level of this group?
It's really hard to compare, Robbie, because, I've always equated that Super Bowl season, as a 16-year-old kid getting a Maserati, for their 16th birthday. Because after that, there was nowhere to go but down.
Yep.
The next year, people never thought they'd ever lose in Adelphia Coliseum. And, of course, the Ravens shattered that twice. The second time, a loss that just about every guy on that team will take to his grave.
Oh, yeah.
It just will.
Yep.
And fair or unfair, that was a loss. It was so funny. You're not supposed to care when you're a reporter. And I didn't want to go to work the next day.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I just didn't. It was painful. It was because the year before had been so exhilarating. Going to Indy, watching Eddie George silence the crowd.
Yep.
Going to Jacksonville, knowing the Titans own the Jags, and that second half beatdown, and hearing, at the time I would listen to the visiting radio call, and hearing their radio guys just with resignation say, the Titans are routing the Jaguars again. It's a historically great Jaguars team. So I think the expectations for that team, the first 5 years, they went to 2 AFC conference championships. I was in Oakland when they lost to the Raiders, the team that looked unbeatable till they lost to the Tampa Bay Bucks.
Yeah.
But I think it's different. I just think, the fans went through that really bad stretch. And I just think it's a new generation of fans. I think last year, the last few years really, the Mariota victory in Kansas City, to me, was no small thing.
Yep.
That was a pretty notable achievement. And then they didn't go to the playoffs the next year. And then the year after, beating the Patriots. For the longest time, Titans didn't beat the Patriots a whole lot. I remember the Monday night game, Javon Curse coming back and the place going crazy. But there weren't a lot of times the Titans beat the Patriots.
Yep.
And then the Titans beat the Ravens. They weren't supposed to beat the Ravens for the second time. That to me, in a lot of ways, was almost more impressive than the Super Bowl year. Because they were real underdogs. And losing to the Chiefs, as we found out, not exactly the crime of the century, because the Chiefs were historically, had an offense that nobody could stop. So as far as expectations, fans are fans. I mean, some fans are going to, feel like this should be a Super Bowl team, and that's their prerogative. They're fans. They have a right to think whatever they want. I think the fan base is pretty fired up, though, for this team. It should be. They should fill that place. Nissan Stadium should be they should have every ticket sold. I know it's different now, where the opposing team is going to have a significant contingent of their fans. But I think Amy Adams Strunk and John Robinson have done their level best to go out and put together a winner. It hasn't always been perfect. I think they'd acknowledge that. Yeah, they whiffed on a first-round draft pick.
Yep.
They whiffed on their 2 free agents last year. But they tried. I mean, that's all you can ask. There's no guarantee when you sign these guys they're going to come in here and be great. And undaunted, they went out and got Julio Jones, which I'll argue I thought was at this point you go for it.
Yep.
It's like with the Predators. There are years David should go for it, Poyle. There are other years you realize, they're not going to win it. Keep your draft picks or whatever. Keep your assets. So I think fans should feel like the Titans have done their best. You might not agree with who they drafted, but that doesn't always turn out the way you think either.
Sure.
So I think the fan base is pretty fired up. They should be.
Oh, I think they are too. And look, to your point, I mean, there's no guarantee Julio Jones is going to come in here and is going to work out now. I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, for the longest time, this team really lacked star quality.
Mm-hmm.
And now it has it. First of all, Derrick Henry, absolutely. A.J. Brown, absolutely. And now in comes Julio Jones. And I think that's exciting. And the good thing about this team, their stars are not overrated.
No.
Their stars are pretty grounded. They're not divas. They want to win. And I think that sort of reflects the values of this city. And I like that. I think this team has and should connect with the fan base, and hopefully they'll have a good result.
Yeah, and look, and you know this, it's going to be difficult to have kind of the same level of connection that, McNair and Eddie George and just that team with the newness of it coming in. You mentioned the Super Bowl, the first year they were the Titans coming into Adelphia Coliseum. I mean, those are the glory days. Like growing up here and kind of that being what my childhood was here. Like that's always a special place in your heart, right?
You never forget your first love.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't. And I remember when Steve McNair was murdered, and Dana O'Neill from ESPN.com, called me and interviewed me, and I said the same thing about that team, about that group. There is nothing like your first love, and Steve will always be a part of that. But so will Eddie. Yep. And, I worked with Frank Wycheck for, 12 years. Believe me, walking around town, people fell over themselves for him. I mean, they just did. And I understand. I worked with Kevin Dyson for a long time. Same thing. Who could have two divergent experiences like Kevin Dyson?
Yep.
Scoring on the Music City Miracle and then coming up a yard short of winning or at least sending the Super Bowl into overtime. So with all that, this team has accomplished a lot, but they haven't quite gotten as far as that team.
No. And we had this discussion last week when you start to talking about, the best players in Titans history, the most beloved players in Titans history. I mean, like I said, it's going to be difficult to surpass McNair and Eddie George on that front. But I think Derrick Henry's in that conversation right now. Like Derrick Henry is absolutely in that conversation, and I hope that we're enjoying what we're watching right now and kind of taking it in, because what that guy has done, what he's continuing to do is special, and he is right up there in that conversation with all-time Titans.
And I roll my eyes when I hear people dump it on Tannehill.
Yep.
I'm like, I get the fact that he didn't have a great playoff game against the Ravens. But really beyond that, why wouldn't you, hand the ball to Derrick Henry? Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. So I that bothers me a little, because Tannehill has really been, an integral part of their success. But, you look back and, McNair had some good postseasons. And I think that Tannehill needs that.
Yep, and that's going to be hopefully the next step for him this year as the Titans kind of find their way into the playoff mix here with training camp starting here in just a few weeks. Expectations sky high for this Titans team. And to help us talk more about that, we'll do what we do every Monday at 8 o'clock. Our buddy Corey Curtis from News 2 will join us to begin the next hour. We'll do that coming up next. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode live from the Wholesaling Studios, powered by RumbleOn.com here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, hour number 3 of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Mark Howard, Ryan Porth here with you on this Monday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Scheduled to be joined shortly by Corey Curtis from News 2, so we're efforting to get Corey on the show. Right now, taking your thoughts on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Now, Mark, it was a busy weekend in the world of sports. You had Stanley Cup playoffs, NBA playoffs, MLS action on Friday night here in Nashville with New York as well. NASCAR, U.S. Open. What did you enjoy the most this weekend in the world of sports? College World Series as well, obviously.
Boy. I enjoyed the Vandy game, but I love the U.S. Open. Have not picked up a golf club in 15 years, but I still love watching golf,
Yep.
especially the majors. And what a great story, John Rahm. 2 weeks ago, had the tournament won by 6 shots and got disqualified basically for testing positive for COVID-19.
Yep.
Essentially like $1.5 million out of his pocket, and then comes back and wins the Open with just 2 incredible putts on 17 and 18. Louis Oosthuizen, bogeyed 17, obviously.
Yep.
So he would have needed a birdie on 18. But, that course, at Torrey Pines was really amazing as the weekend wore on. It just got tougher and tougher. Brooks Koepka fell apart Sunday. Rory McIlroy did. DeChambeau just shot a 44 on the backside. Sunday that was just unbelievable. He looked like me out there. There are sometimes with DeChambeau that the guy's just a freak of nature, and other times he looks like a meathead out there, and he did yesterday. But there were others, who stumbled. The pressure was just incredible. And it was interesting to me that for years, Johnny Miller was chastised by a lot of critics for being too hard on the golfers.
Yep.
By saying that some of them choke. And they do. We all know that. And Johnny Miller's retort always was, I'm working for the viewers, not the golfers.
That's right.
And Johnny Miller, to me, was ripped from stem to stern, and then he rolled out of bed, like age 50, and won at Pebble Beach, which shut everybody up, which I loved. But anyway, aside from that, the NBC commentators were doing that all weekend, about talking about how the pressure, affected those golfers, especially on those 8-foot putts. But, good for John Rahm, who had not won a major. It was a great story. He and his wife just had a baby. Because of COVID-19, his parents had come from Spain to see him, and he had to wait 2 weeks to see him, and they got to see him win the Open. So I thought it was a really neat story. Listen, I'm a huge Tiger Woods fan. I miss him. I think about 2008 at Torrey Pines and that, epic Open win, over Rocco Mediate in that playoff, the putt he made on 18 and all that. But I thought that the Open was, it was really fun. You saw sort of the freak shot, the ball, getting stuck in the tree.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Which was totally bizarre. So there were just a lot of crazy things that happened in the Open. But you saw really good players who have won majors before just totally disintegrate. We still, Jordan Spieth, really, couldn't, get above par, for the tournament. And you just saw others, DJ, never really made a run. But I thought Koepka was going to make a run. He got within, 2 shots on the backside, and just hopped on the bogey train, and that was it.
Let's go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and bring in our good friend Corey Curtis from News 2. Corey, what's going on, brother? How we doing?
I'm good this morning, guys. How are you?
We are doing great. Appreciate you taking time to join us. And, Corey, we've talked about over the last hour or so this Titans team and expectations for this group heading in. I want to get your thoughts on just the excitement level that you sense from this Titans fan base. How excited are Titans fans about this team? How does it compare to maybe some of the glory days years with McNair and Eddie George and some of the good Titans teams we've seen along the way?
Well, I mean, I think hope is a big word, and look, fans love names. We know that, and so when you make a deal for a guy like Julio Jones, then the name gets them excited. I remember the year I think Ed Reed got let go and Brian Urlacher got let go, and the fans wanted those two guys desperately, and I was just like, look, neither of their team want them anymore. Okay, their teams know that they've got nothing left, and neither of them had anything left. And so fans get excited about names. The thing about Julio Jones is he's got something left. And so there is more to be excited about. But the difference with this team and those teams that you're talking about is that team went to the Super Bowl. That team went to the Super Bowl, and that team was proven on both sides of the ball. You know, you had a quarterback, you had a running back, you had, Derek Mason, you had a very good offensive line, and you had a defense with Javon Curse and Albert Hainsworth, and you had guys who made plays. This team is proven on one side of the ball right now, and it's exciting because that side of the ball also got Julio Jones. The defense has been revamped, and so I think that there can be cautious optimism, and I think for some people, just adding Julio Jones is enough to say, well, if we can play any defense at all, we're in the Super Bowl. And then I think there are other people who say, boy, our offense is going to be great, but man, our defense has got to prove it can do something. And I think that's probably the smarter approach, because while they've added players, that side of the ball hasn't proven anything yet. And that's the big difference between the two teams. One's proven it on both sides, the other one hasn't.
We're speaking to Corey Curtis, of course, longtime sports anchor at News 2.
How did that happen? How did I get old?
You're the dean, man. Wow. You are.
I'm Hope now.
You are. There are certain things that come with it that I'll tell you off mic. Corey, the other interesting thing, and I think you did a good job of sort of, talking about the Titans. But it's kind of a generational thing. I mean, the generation is finally, turned a little bit. And I'm sure that younger fans, have attached themselves. And you're right. I mean, the Titans don't have really an established star on defense. But they do have, a running back, a quarterback, and two receivers on offense. And it's kind of interesting to me how this perspective, is kind of generational.
Yeah, well, I mean, and it always is. It's like LeBron and Michael Jordan. People, Jordan guys are never going to get completely on board with LeBron. Like I'm a Jordan guy. LeBron's amazing, but he's not Jordan. Okay, and that's the way it's always going to be with just about every team. But and this team does have, and it's another part of that, Mark, is this team has been starved for stars for a long time. I remember when Ken Wisenhunt was the head coach, and boy, were those good days.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember when the Cowboys came to town and just gave it to them. I mean, DeMarco Murray just went up and down the field. And I remember talking to my weekend guy at the Giant, Joe Leadingham. I was like, man, why can't the Titans have guys like that? I mean, and he ended up coming to them eventually. But I mean, that Cowboys Pro Bowler.
Yeah.
Kevin Byard is an All-Pro. They've got guys. Jeffrey Simmons, we think, is going to be a really good player. Bud Dupree is a guy who's a Pro Bowl player. He's got to prove he can still do it at that level coming off the ACL. But this is the first time in a very long time where you look at a team with a lot of star power on it. I always, joked for years that well after Steve and Eddie were gone, the only jerseys you saw in Nissan Stadium were 9 and 27 because they were the only ones still worth buying. Well, now you've got a whole lot of jerseys you can buy with some really good players' names and numbers on them. And I think That's really the exciting thing for this generation, because we're also in a generation that roots for players more than it roots for teams, and this team has players worth rooting for.
Let me ask you too. We covered racing way back, in your early days at 2, and it was pretty much drilled into our heads that there was no way the Cup Series was coming back here unless Dover did something. Who owned the super speedway track. How amazing a story is yesterday, given that the super speedway, was almost an antique mall, and people had pretty much given up on Cup racing ever coming back to Nashville. The sport was, diminished in terms of ratings, in attendance around the country. And now all of a sudden, it's coming back. And look what we saw just outside of Nashville yesterday.
Well, Mark, you're exactly right. And I've looked at this for years, and I have said the same thing over and over again. What the hell is NASCAR doing? And NASCAR had to be looking at itself yesterday and say, what the hell have we been doing for the last decade? How stupid are we? Why haven't we been here? This has traditionally been one of our largest TV audiences in the country year in and year out, and we completely abandoned these people. We abandoned them to go all over the country to people who really don't care as much. And now that these people who used to come to all our races all over the Southeast can't travel because it's too far, and so they spend all their money on Alabama and Auburn football now. And so, yes, they finally came here, and you know what? It was exactly what I thought it would be. It was amazing, and fans showed up, and fans loved it. And it is amazing that they've been able to get that track up and ready to go. But the fact that they had an awesome crowd and it was a celebration, no, that doesn't surprise me at all. And I think all it's going to do is feed even further into the fact that we are going to have 2 races. We're going to have a race there, and we're going to have one here at the fairgrounds eventually, because this town is moving forward. This town has money. It has disposable income. It has a growing population to populate these races. NASCAR is 15, 20 years late on this deal. They're finally here. They have to be ecstatic about being here, but they also got to feel a little bit dumb about not being here. That's my take.
Corey Curtis from News 2 on the line with us, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Corey, last thing for you here. College World Series action this weekend with Vanderbilt and Tennessee. Vanderbilt gets it done coming up with some clutch plays at the end. They win a walk-off marathon game in the 12th inning. Not as well for Tennessee and Tony Vitello and company. What stood out to you about Tennessee and Vanderbilt in the College World Series in their opening games this weekend?
Well, I think it was a good definition of a team who's been there before and a team who hasn't. I mean, if you've never been there, it's kind of an awesome experience. And these Vanderbilt guys have been there. The head coach has been there, and they fell behind. They didn't panic. They kept playing. They put the pressure on Arizona, and they won the game. And Tennessee went and lost 6-0. It happens your first time out there, and so I tend to think that this Tennessee team is a tough team. And I think it's kind of an energetic bunch. I covered South Carolina for a long time, and I was there when Ray Tanner took them there for the first time, and they lost their first game 13-1 to Georgia Tech, and everybody thought, oh my God, this is embarrassing. What a short trip, what a horrible trip it was going to be. They ended up being there for 9 days because they played from the losers bracket all the way back to the championship game. So Tennessee's not done. I think they've got the right kind of guys to bounce back. But having said that, going to Omaha is different. It's tough. I mean, the platform is awesome, and usually experience is really, really important. And I think leadership is really, really important. And we know Vanderbilt's got awesome leadership.
Corey Curtis from News 2 has been our guest here on Robby and Rexrode. Joins us every Monday at 8 o'clock. Corey, great stuff, man. Appreciate you taking time to join us, and happy Father's Day.
All right, thank you. I was going to say that. Happy Father's Day, Mark. I hope you had a good day yesterday.
Thanks, bud.
Absolutely. Corey Curtis joins us every week here on Mondays at 8 o'clock. When we come back, we'll react a little bit to what Corey had to say there. Get back into the College World Series as well. A big win for Vanderbilt. What does it mean for the Doors as they move forward here with Jack Leiter coming up on the mound today as well? We'll get to that next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. This Wednesday, it's your chance to participate in the Nashville SC Pick to Click, brought to you by Camarena Tequila. If you correctly guess which player scores a goal in the game this Friday night, you win a prize pack and a 4-pack of tickets to an upcoming Nashville SC home game. Participate this Wednesday morning at 9:45 a.m. Your next opportunity to participate in Nashville SC Pick to Click. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Mark Howard, Ryan Porth here with you on this Monday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. A big win for the Doors this weekend in Omaha, 7-6 in 12 innings against Arizona. Jason Gonzalez, the walk-off winner, single up the middle, and the Doors get it done. Gonzalez, a couple of big hits in that game, including a game-tying two-run home run in the fourth. Carter Young, a big home run in the game as well. And, Mark, it felt to me, and I thought Corey Curtis put this well in the last segment as well, felt to me like a team that not afraid of the moment. They've been there before. Their coach has been there many times before. And I thought Vanderbilt, even when things started to get a little hairy and they got down in the game, they never panicked, and they were just able to find their way back into a situation where Carter Young hits a big hit, even in the last inning, in the ninth inning, when they lose the lead and it's 6-6. I thought they had a couple opportunities to win it in extra innings as well, and then ultimately a big hit by Jason Gonzalez gets it done.
Well, it should be better said that Vanderbilt is a team that is prepared for Omaha through the whole season, through its process.
Yep.
Because technically, on the roster, not a lot of guys have been to Omaha or been part of the College World Series. But Tim Corbin, from the crazy run they have to do, that makes them all throw up, by the way, to begin practice, everything is geared towards reaching Omaha.
Yep.
And they play a tough schedule, out of conference, second to none. They travel a couple of times to get used to playing the highly ranked teams, in places that aren't Hawkins Field. And I think that's worked for them. But Corey's right. For Tennessee, this is really only the beginning. If we're having the same, conversation in 10 years, we're going to be talking about a Tennessee team that hopefully, if Tony Vitello stays, will have made multiple trips to Omaha, won some national championships, and they would be a lot more similar to Vanderbilt then than they are now. They're very talented, and maybe that game will allow them to be a better team moving forward. And Corey's right. It's a long trip through the losers bracket, but it can be done. And Tennessee certainly has the wherewithal. They don't have great starting pitching depth, but offensively, they're a really good team, and they can outscore you. So I thought they were sort of overwhelmed by the moment, in the loss to Virginia. And believe me, Abbott and Wyatt, the two pitchers for Virginia, were phenomenal. And Tennessee did squander some scoring opportunities. But want to see them bounce back, though. It would not be good, to be 2 and done.
It would not. And Tennessee taking on Texas tomorrow in the losers bracket, an elimination game between Tennessee and Texas. Vanderbilt tonight against NC State. Jack Leiter will be on the mound for the Doors. And maybe the most impressive part of Saturday for me for Vanderbilt was, Kumar Rocker and the defense really in the first inning, they had some miscues, had some mistakes. Rocker settled in. I think he retired 15 in a row after that. And then they got to him again in the seventh, and you had to go a little bit deeper into your bullpen, and they've gone in the regional and in the super regional as well. But to be able to overcome that with an offensive team like Arizona, we knew coming into the game, I think they were hitting .329 as a team on the season coming into the game. So obviously they've got some pop. They can hit the ball very well. You didn't get, a vintage Rocker performance, and you're able to still win, keep yourself in the winner's bracket, and move ahead now with Leiter. I think that's a big deal with Leiter coming in today And if he pitches anything like he's pitched in the regional and super regional, could be in pretty good shape against NC State today.
If he can spot, his breaking ball, his second and third pitches, he's unhittable.
Yep.
And I think it's good that he went through a couple of games where he got touched up. I just feel like sometimes, that feeling of invincibility, is kind of, really isn't necessarily valid. And a lot of times, a guy in that situation will give up some runs, and he won't know what to do.
Yep.
So, Jack Leiter has sort of been through the ringer. He's had a couple of tough outings, but I like Vanderbilt's chances tonight against a very good NC State team, a team a lot of people felt like might be the underdog to watch in this World Series.
Yep, and it seems like Carter Young is finding his way again offensively. He hits the homer in the seventh inning the other day to put Vanderbilt up 6-5. He's been such a force offensively for them all season long, so good defensively as well. But coming back from the injury, he's a switch hitter. He launches the 2-run home run on Saturday to give Vanderbilt the 6-5 lead. It's not the most potent Vanderbilt lineup that we've seen. I mean, they've certainly had, I think, some deeper lineups and lineups with more power to it. But just the different things that this lineup could do with, Javier Vaz in there, Enrique Bradfield. We've talked a lot about him on the show as well, and their ability to change things in the running game and really put pressure on other teams that way on the base paths. I mean, I thought, especially in extra innings the other night, they had a couple passed balls, Arizona did, and I thought a lot of it was there was some pressure. Javier Vaz, I mean, he was taking like a 6-step lead off of first base and just causing havoc that way. Just those two specifically, with Vaz coming in late in the season and finding a role for himself, and Enrique Bradfield playing the way he's played all year long. Pretty good couple of threats on the base paths for Vanderbilt as well.
Yeah, I mean, they did what they had to do. And like you said, bad first inning, 3 errors. Before Gonzalez's game-winning hit, they were 1 for 7 with runners in scoring position, which is not a stat I'm sure Tim Corbin was thrilled with. They're gonna see a good pitcher tonight in Sam Highfill. He hasn't lost since April 3rd. He's won 10 of his last 11. So this is a guy who definitely he beat Arkansas, which I'm sure got Vanderbilt's attention. So they've got another tough matchup. And watch this kid, Johnny Butler. He's been amazing. Drove in 5 runs in their win over Stanford, which was their opener in the World Series. So NC State, pretty formidable opponent.
Yep, pretty formidable opponent, and that'll be underway tonight for Vanderbilt at 6 o'clock. Jack Leiter on the mound for that game, and we'll see if Vanderbilt can continue rolling along here in the College World Series. We'll continue the discussion on the College World Series when we come back. Dive a little bit deeper into Tony Vitello and the Tennessee Vols as well. Can they stay alive against Texas in the losers bracket in an elimination game tomorrow in Omaha? We'll get to that coming up next. ESPN 94.9 is the home for Nashville Sounds baseball. Tomorrow the Sounds return to First Horizon Park and begin a 6-game series versus the Charlotte Knights, the AAA affiliate of the Chicago White Sox. Nashville Sounds baseball on ESPN 94.9, presented by Farm Bureau Health Plans and 312 Pizza Company. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game, streaming live on Periscope, on YouTube, and on Twitch as well.
Wow, Boogie Wonderland.
Yeah, buddy. What a jam.
Gotta love that.
When's the last time you heard that one, Mark?
About 3 days ago. It's my music.
That's right. It's a great song. Ryan Porth spinning the tunes. Coming back in today on Robby and Rexrode. Mark Howard in for Joe today. Taking your thoughts on our text line. Driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Right now, discussing the College World Series. Vanderbilt a big win. Tennessee did not go quite as well for the Vols in Game 1 in Omaha yesterday. They lose 6-0 to Virginia. Now in an elimination game coming up tomorrow against Texas. So a battle of the UTs in the elimination game. Mark, it felt to me like a team that, and Tony Vitello talked a little bit about this as well. They just looked out of sync. They looked like they were indecisive at times. And it's one game. Things can, you can fix it. You can rebound from this for sure as they move forward here. But it did kind of feel like one game where maybe the moment was a little bit too big for them, and they were trying to do too much at times out there. And it just ended up in a performance where offensively they couldn't come up with the timely hits. Now, I thought early in the game, they might be on the verge of breaking things open. I mean, they had two runners on base with no out, and then they couldn't get anybody over at that point, and that happened 3 times throughout the course of the game. First inning, 5th inning, 6th inning as well, where you've got 2 runners on, nobody out, and you're just not able to come up with those timely hits and those timely plays at that point. I thought too often a case of maybe the Vols not being as decisive as they needed to be.
Well, I also think too they kind of got gut punched there. They had as you mentioned, they had 2 runners on. Liam Spence hit it on the screws, but it was right to their second baseman, Max Kotler, and then the next 2 guys, Lipschitz and Beck, struck out. They get runners at second and third in the 5th inning, and they couldn't score. You can't get frustrated. But, again, this is baseball. It's the old line. Momentum is only as good as your next day's starting pitcher.
That's right.
So we'll see how Tennessee does if they can get off the mat because you generate a little bit of momentum. You win this game. Going through the loser's bracket is a daunting task. But for Tennessee, I think it's doable.
So you mentioned earlier in the show with Tony Vitello, obviously he's done a great job with this Tennessee team, getting his team to Omaha for the first time since 2005. Texas A&M's spot has been filled. LSU's job still open. To me, if Vitello was going to leave and not be back at Tennessee, it's probably the LSU job that would be the case for. How concerned would you be if you're a Tennessee fan? Do you think that Tennessee has done enough, committed enough at this point where you don't worry about Tony Vitello leaving if you're a Vols fan?
Well, you never say never. I mean, you're crazy if you do that. But I'm sure Tony Vitello notices that Paul Mainieri had a good run at LSU, but he won only 1 national championship. His predecessor, Skip Bertman, won 5 national titles at LSU and before that Miami. Now, it was a different game when Skip Bertman was coaching.
Yep.
There wasn't as much parity, much harder to win a national championship. And Mainieri had a good run, but their fan base, believe me, was ready for him to retire. And it doesn't help with Skip Bertman at every game. It's sort of like John Wooden, when he would sit, at UCLA games, and the guy on the bench, was trying to win just one, after Wooden won so much. Tony Vitello doesn't have to worry about that at Tennessee. First of all, they're happy he's there. Yeah, if the program slips, he'll get the requisite criticism. But he's got a chance to build something. They're going to improve the facilities, and they will. Tennessee will spend. I can't imagine why he'd want to leave. And he can win a national championship at Tennessee. He's already proven that with his recruiting. I would love for him to stay. I think it'd be great for the Tennessee-Vanderbilt rivalry. And I just think it'd be good for the SEC if Tennessee becomes, once again a heavyweight.
So what do you think about college baseball in this state, in this market? Obviously, Vanderbilt, we know what they are. We know what they've been for the last decade plus with Tim Corbin. I mean, going back to, David Price in his days of being recruited here, Vanderbilt has turned into a monster and a powerhouse on the college baseball level. Now that you have Tennessee kind of entering into this mix for the first time with Tony Vitello, what do you think of this market in terms of what it could be like for college baseball, the interest level as well? And what do you think this run does with both Tennessee and Vanderbilt in Omaha at the College World Series?
Well, I think it's great for, us in the media would say it's great for business.
Yep.
Because, two schools that we talk about a lot are there and could both win. Vanderbilt has obviously earned its place as one of the preeminent college athletic programs, not only in the state but in the country. Tim Corbin, second to none, at his profession, and I think, listen, Vanderbilt fans will tell you, Tim Corbin had a couple of chances to leave, and he decided to stay here, and it has been to Vanderbilt's benefit. I mean, what he has built is just incredible. But give Vitello credit. In just a short time, in 3 years, he's got him going to the I think it's 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Third year NCAA tournament, World Series. That's pretty impressive. So it would lead you to think that this is no fluke. And, he'll build this program up to where it's a perennial power. And I think it's all good. I mean, they filled up Lindsey Nelson Stadium in Knoxville. Tennessee baseball has once again become a really hot item, and I think that's absolutely good for business.
Well, I think it is. I just wonder, what's the staying power here? Because look,
I think Corbin. Listen, Vanderbilt's going to be. I mean, you don't know. You really don't know, and I could give you a lot of different examples. When I went to college, when I went to Ithaca College in the late 70s, Cornell lacrosse was a dynasty. Richie Moran was the coach, and I could name you a bunch of coaches, who were, who would tell you that Richie Moran hung the moon. But, eventually the lacrosse program kind of petered out. Richie Moran had a winless season before he retired. So you never know. You never take success for granted. And I don't think Tim Corbin's built that way. I think, as long as he's there, they're going to be competitive. Recruiting in college baseball is insane.
Yeah.
Because you're recruiting kids that won't even play for you.
Yeah.
Kids who are going to go in the draft. Vanderbilt's, got a shortstop from Texas, I think. That's going to go in the top 10 that'll never play for him. So I think both programs have a chance for staying power. With Corbin, he's demonstrated that he can sustain, that success there, that it's just not a fluky one-year thing. And for Vitello, he's got that challenge. You don't take success for granted. For Tennessee, everything went their way this year, and I think they tell you that. That doesn't mean it's going to happen that way every year. But Vitello's off to a good start, and I can't see why he would leave.
Yeah, and now the challenge for Tennessee is taking on Texas tomorrow in an elimination game at 1 o'clock, and you would think Tidwell would be on the mound for the Vols at that point as well. And now the challenge of going through the losers bracket, if you can get past Texas, is you got to play more games, and you got to go deeper into that bullpen. And that was a concern I had about Tennessee coming into this tournament. If you ended up in the losers bracket, how deep can you go? How deep are you comfortable going if you're Tony Vitello into the rotation, into the bullpen? And can you find a way to survive at that point? I mean, I feel like from a depth perspective, maybe the bullpen depth not quite there yet for Tony Vitello in this program, as it is with some other teams in this tournament so far. We're about to find out very quickly how deep they are in their pitching rotation and in their bullpen as well.
Yeah, and all of a sudden you've got kids who had up and down seasons, who are now thrust in the highest pressure situations they've ever faced in their careers. And it'll be interesting to see how they react.
Yeah, yes, it will be. And that starts tomorrow for Tennessee against Texas. Taking your thoughts on the Vols on our text line all show long, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. I would expect and hope Tennessee tomorrow play a little bit more like that team we've seen all season long in terms of the way they approach the game. I think part of what's made this Tennessee team so much fun to watch, and part of why there's been a little bit of hostility at times directed their way, is their attitude.
They play with a swagger,
They do.
no doubt.
And I felt like that was totally missing yesterday. Tony Vitello talked about that after the game in terms of just not being as, passionate and not being as, as convicted as they normally are. I would expect that to change tomorrow against Texas. Win or lose, I don't know if that's going to end up making the difference. I would hope some of that swagger comes back for Tennessee tomorrow against the Longhorns.
And you can't say that they're just a one-trick pony in terms of they can only win at Lindsey Nelson Stadium.
No.
They won the SEC tournament. No small thing. So let's see more of that.
When we come back, we will switch gears, get into a little NBA talk. Much different setup for the conference finals this year than we expected heading in. Is this good or bad for the NBA? Has this increased your watching experience on the NBA? Let us know on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Mark Howard, Ryan Porth here with you on this Monday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Going to have Darren McFarland coming up to begin the 9 o'clock hour. We'll get his thoughts on the weekend that was for NASCAR in Nashville. That coming up to begin the 9 o'clock hour here in about 15 minutes or so. Right now, talking NBA, it's a much different looking conference final setup this year for the NBA. The Phoenix Suns and LA Clippers got underway in the Western Conference finals yesterday. Phoenix taking a 1-0 series lead there. And then Atlanta and Philadelphia last night in Game 7. Atlanta takes down the Sixers. The Sixers choke again. And Atlanta finds themselves in the Eastern Conference final against the Milwaukee Bucks. That means no LeBron, no Kevin Durant, no Steph Curry in the conference finals for the NBA. Mark, as you look at this setup for the NBA with Phoenix, the Clippers, now in the East with Milwaukee and Atlanta as well, some different blood in the conference finals. Is this a good thing for the NBA, or NBA executives sitting here today saying, oh, goodness, we don't have much of our star power left in these playoffs, especially the superstars like Durant, LeBron, Kyrie, all these different players?
Well, first of all, I took great joy in seeing the Nets lose.
I did too.
It was a great game, and the fact is, if Kevin Durant's foot is a few inches, even an inch back, the Nets win that game and win the series.
Just one shoe size smaller.
It's
They're in the conference
unbelievable
final.
that his foot was on the three-point line when he made an incredible shot, descended into overtime, and I was sure the Nets were going to win that game, and the Bucks gutted it out. To their credit, playing good team defense, and you basically got to stop Durant. Harden was really a shell of his former self with the hamstring injury.
He was, and Kyrie hurt as well. It just Brooklyn fell apart, and KD did everything he could do. I mean, he had almost 50 points again, but just
that was
wasn't
the
quite
team
enough.
that was sort of engineered to be the accumulation of the superstars.
Yep.
And it didn't work. I mean, Blake Griffin went over there and served a decent role, but it didn't happen for him. I mean, they had Jeff Green, they had some pretty good supporting players. Good for the Bucks, who have been through their share of trials and tribulations. Mike Budenholzer, the former Hawks coach, gets to go up against his former team.
Yep.
And I don't think he expected that. I don't think anybody expected the Hawks to make it to the NBA semifinals. Trae Young has been unbelievable. He had 21 last night. Kevin Huerter was really the big hero.
He was.
For the Hawks. And if you don't know who he is, he's a Rojo redhead out of the University of Maryland. Had 27 and did a great job on the defensive end. And the fact is, Ben Simmons came up microscopic. He had 5 points, only got to the free throw line for 2 shots. He's not a good free thrower anyway. And he admitted after the game that he needed to step up offensively. And, being a Celtics fan, I'll always love Doc Rivers. But the fact is, Doc Rivers can screw it up in the best of situations. But good for the Hawks. Made an in-season coaching change, and Nate McMillan has been phenomenal. So good for them, and that makes for a compelling series. And in the West, you got Chris Paul out with COVID issues.
Yep.
And you got Kawhi Leonard out for the Clippers. So who knows which direction that one goes. I would love to see the Clippers win a title. They're just the stepsons, the stepchildren at Staples Center to the Lakers. And it would be pretty cool if they won. That was a pretty good atmosphere for them in Game 1, but or for the clinching game in Game 7. But we'll see. I mean, the Suns, again, were a team that acquired Chris Paul, but it was really interesting what they talked about, that their executives, when they acquired Chris Paul, didn't ask what he could do for them, but what they could do for him.
Yep.
And, they've done a really good job with that team, and look where they are.
So, Ryan Porth, as you look at the Final Four now in the NBA with the Clippers, the Suns, the Hawks, and the Bucks, still some star power there, some of which is now hurt or unavailable at the moment. Do you like this? Is this bad for the NBA? How do you think this shapes up with a much different-looking Final Four than we're used to?
I'm intrigued by it because it's all new blood. Like, off the top of my head, have any of these teams won a title? Did the Hawks win way back?
The Bucks have way back.
Right.
The Hawks, the Bucks did with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and who was it?
Was it Moses Malone?
Not Moses Malone.
Oscar Robertson?
Oscar
Robertson, yeah.
Good God.
Good gracious.
Whiffed on that one. The Hawks won back in St. Louis in the 50s.
Yeah.
So, and the Clippers and the Suns have never won.
Clippers and Suns have never.
So I like
a lot of Charles Barkley throwbacks this weekend.
Yes, it is. So I'm intrigued by the newness of these teams being this far into the playoffs. However, I enjoy the theater. I enjoy the NBA Finals with LeBron James and Steph Curry and Kevin Durant and the stars, the typical superstars going head to head. Like if it's, say, Milwaukee Phoenix is the Greek Freak versus Chris Paul, is that really going to do it for people?
Probably not.
I don't think it will for me. I mean, I'll watch, but I don't know if I'll be as into it as, say, like the Cavaliers and Warriors NBA Finals back in like 2016 when that was great theater all around.
Now, Nashville Predators director of broadcasting, among other things, Bob Cole, a rabid Milwaukeean and Bucks fan, is all over this.
Oh yeah.
It's a big moment for the Bucks the other night.
I mean, all of these teams kind of got monkeys off their back getting to the conference final. So that aspect of it is cool. I do wish there was one big superstar. Not that the Greek Freak isn't, but I don't think
he's not the same level yet as LeBron and KD.
And maybe this is it.
Not. He's a star, but he's not on that level.
But maybe this is his coming out party, and if Milwaukee wins it, he puts himself closer to that territory.
Could be. I mean, look, I think if it ended up being Milwaukee and Phoenix, I think it could be a pretty great series. The question is, like, is anybody going to watch?
Sure.
That's the thing. Like, I think the basketball would be great.
I think the winner of the West, if they're healthy, if Kawhi plays and Chris Paul plays, the winner of that series will win the title.
Could be. Let's go to our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Got a texture that says, I think lots of NBA fans love the newness of it. We've been accustomed to LeBron and or the Warriors for the last decade, but I think there's a problem with basketball because I find myself only tuning in at the end of the fourth quarter if it's close. What do you think of that, Mark?
Well, that's a commonly held belief among a lot of fans. You know, you want to know about an NBA game, just watch the fourth quarter. Listen, I think the game is a lot better than it used to be.
I do too.
I don't think, you don't have, these teams just playing isolation or that. It's gone back, it's gone back to the guards. It's not a big man's game really anymore. Although, the big men are a lot more athletic. Guys like Durant are just unbelievable. So I think the NBA is really as good as it's ever been.
I think it is too. And, I've enjoyed the playoffs so far. Like, the game 7 between Milwaukee and Brooklyn was awesome on Saturday night.
No doubt. I mean, how can you not like a game like that? And, you got a Bucks team that, look kind of overmatched early. And obviously the Nets' injuries, have been a major contributor. But Milwaukee hung tough, and they won in overtime, and I like that. And what a story is Trae Young.
Yeah.
Do you know who he was traded for?
I do not.
He was traded by Dallas for Luka Doncic.
Yeah, that's right.
I'd say both sides are happy with what they got.
Yeah. We'll see if Luka Doncic stays, by the way.
I was about to say
what in the world's going on in Dallas? Everybody's leaving. Carlisle leaves. He just says, I'm not coming back. Apparently Luka Doncic may not want to be there long term.
I'm such a huge fan of Mark Cuban, but that organization has had so many issues, whether it's sexual harassment or suddenly disarray in the front office. And, the article in The Athletic saying that a former professional gambler is really the most influential person in the organization, to Mark Cuban. And that's, one of the reasons. Well, Donnie Nelson felt like he got fired, but Donnie Nelson didn't like it, and that soured his relationship with the Mavs owner.
Yeah, it's been a crazy, crazy few weeks there in Dallas with all the news that has come out of there now with Luka Doncic being kind of the latest to be involved with that. Let's go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in Sean from Nashville, who wants to weigh in. Sean, thanks for calling in to Robby and Rexrode. Hello, Sean. Sean, are you there? All right, we will see if we can reconnect with Sean coming up down the stretch. We got Darren McFarland coming up next. Real quickly, final thoughts on the NBA. I think the basketball has been great. I do think that the ratings are going to suffer because of the lack of star power left in the playoffs at this point. But honestly, I'm okay with 1 year of this. Like I think next year Brooklyn will be back if they can stay healthy, and you can't convince me. Like if Kyrie and James Harden were healthy, they'd still be in the playoffs. I mean, they were totally dominant over Milwaukee in the first couple of games. So I think we're going to get back to a place where it's still going to be all about the stars in the NBA. That's what it's been for the last decade. And with the player movement that takes place, I think that's going to go back to what it is as they move forward here. I'm cool with 1 year of this, though, of kind of having some new blood in here and seeing what happens. I think the NBA might have needed that.
And we're going to see Marv Albert's final series.
There we are.
As a broadcaster.
Yeah, absolutely. Legendary, Marv Albert. Pretty crazy to think about on that front. When we come back, we'll be joined by Darren McFarland from Darren, Donick, and Chase. He was at NASCAR weekend at the Nashville Superspeedway. We'll get his thoughts on a big weekend here in Music City. That coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode live from the Wholesale Link Studios, powered by RumbleOn.com here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in. Final hour of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Mark Howard, Ryan Porth here with you on this Monday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Pleased to welcome in our good friend Darren McFarland, host of Darren, Dodick, and Chase, who took in a little NASCAR action this weekend at the Nashville Super Speedway. Darren, what's going on, my friend? How we doing?
Robbie, how you doing?
I am doing wonderful.
It finally took X amount of years. I'm not going to give you the number. But, yeah, I figured out over years when it's sunny and it's hot outside that, it's a good idea to put sunscreen on. And so I've been really bad at that over the years, really bad. I'm Irish. I don't tan. I just turned into a fire hydrant. And I figured, you know what, yesterday I'm going to be out in the sun. So I decided to lather up with some sunscreen and go out and enjoy some racing. But it was good, in all seriousness. It was fun to see racing back at the Nashville Superspeedway after a decade. It was nice to see the Cup cars back in this market for the first time in 37 years. I wasn't living here. I've been here a long time. I've been here close to 25 years, but NASCAR Cup was not here, so I even missed that. But 37 years since it's been in this market, and what a great turnout. It looked fantastic. I watched a lot of the coverage. I didn't go. We were out there Friday doing the show, but I didn't go to the races Friday night and Saturday afternoon, but I did watch a lot of the coverage. They absolutely are thrilled to be in Nashville. The coverage it sounded awesome. I listened to our coverage that we were carrying. So overall, I have to believe. I know there was a lot of people that complained about the traffic. I get it. I know that's going to happen. They're going to have to figure that out again because I heard people sat in traffic for hours to get there, to leave, but it's kind of what you expect when you go to big events like that. I know they'll have to figure that part out, but overall, I think it was a really, really good weekend for Nashville.
So, Darren, we were batting this around earlier in the show between Mark and I about NASCAR, and you kind of laid it out beautifully there. It's been 37 years since it's been here in Nashville for the Cup Series, and part of what NASCAR has been trying to do over the last decade plus has been connect with a younger audience and trying to get a younger audience more involved. How big of a deal for younger people who live here in Nashville who maybe this was their first time really being exposed to NASCAR? How big a deal do you think this weekend was and could be in terms of NASCAR kind of building on that fan base here in the Nashville area?
Well, I think they're taking baby steps, Robbie. I don't think they're obviously there, but it is encouraging. I do know people, younger people like yourself, Robbie, young and spry and full of energy.
That's right.
Young whippersnappers who were at the race, and it was the first time they were at a race, first time checking it out. I know that Eric Moses will tell you that they want to not only be younger, but they want to be more diverse, and I think they're working on that as well. They've got a ways to go on both fronts, but I do think NASCAR has got just a different mindset, a different mentality than it's had in past decades. And they realize that they're going to have to do that for this sport to continue to grow because it was a rocket ship many, many decades ago. When you think about 25 years ago, it was a rocket ship. 20 years ago, it was absolutely booming. And then it hit its ceiling, and then it's gone the wrong direction for a good while. And they experimented, they tried this market and that market, and it all basically failed. And now they're back to grassroots, which is Nashville. And now they need to get a new generation of race fans, and they need to be more diverse. And Bernard Pollard waving the flag, out there. I saw Alvin Kamara. I mean, I'm sitting there. I go into the media center, and then I'm out there, and I'm like looking, and I'm like, was that Alvin Kamara? And I'm like, nah. And I'm looking, and I'm just thinking to myself, I think that was Alvin Kamara. And then I realized it was Alvin Kamara without Butch Jones.
There you go.
And, he did have the ball, so I knew Butch Jones wasn't there. But, yeah, it was Alvin Kamara, who's obviously become, through all of this, a big race fan. Bernard Pollard has become a big race fan. And I know Eric Moses, like I said, he wants the sport. They realize the sport knows they need to be more diverse. They need to spread their wings out and reach everybody because it has been stereotyped over the years, rightfully so. And so hopefully they're well on their way to changing that because, honestly, the sport needs that if it's going to continue to grow because once all those hardcore fans, when they were a rocket ship, go away, you better have the next layer ready or your sport's in big trouble.
Darren, what about just the storyline that Speedway 2 years ago was pretty much shuttered? And, for so long, Nashville chased a cup race and kept, hearing no. And then all of a sudden, like you said, bad attendance around the country, dwindling TV ratings, and all of a sudden they come back to Nashville hat in hand.
You know the story, Mark. You lived it. You've been in this market the entire time, and they played it wrong. I mean, they promised a cup race. They built the track with the intentions of having a cup race, and everybody was excited the first go-around, and everybody came out the first go-around, and they had trucks, and they had, I guess at the time, what was it, the Busch Series. It wasn't the Xfinity Series. Same type of racing, just a different name, and they got the open wheel, and everybody was excited, and it was like, when is Cup going to happen? And once people figured out that Cup wasn't coming here, and as you said, the sport was kind of starting to go the wrong direction as well, it was lights out for this market. It had no chance. And good thing is they knew coming here and trying to do that same thing again was never going to work. It was either going to be cup or bust. And so at least they know that this market knows that there is a cup race here. Now it's just a matter of, one, can they keep it at the Nashville Superspeedway long term? Two, can there actually be two cup races in this market, which certainly is the big scuttlebutt at the fairgrounds. That's kind of where Nashville is, because we all know everybody wants to come here. I mean, that's not a big deal to everybody say, yeah, we want to be in your market. Yeah, everybody says, yeah, we want to be in Nashville, but can we do the things that need to be done to actually have two races? By the way, that would be a first on the circuit. Two cup races with two different ownership groups in the same market if it plays out. And I think it will, and that indeed happens. But, Mark, as you know, everything has challenges. It's like the Titans when they first got here. Yesterday looked great. I just painted the picture on radio. This weekend looked fantastic. Yesterday looked fantastic. Was it a sellout? Yes. Will next year be a sellout? Yes. But when at some point you have to keep working. You have to keep, getting your tentacles out there and communicating, building relationships, because one day it's not going to sell out. And what do you have then? And the reason I bring that up is because the Titans went through that. They got here, and it was the easiest sellout in the world. They said the window is open, and 32 minutes later they said the window is closed. Season is sold out. But what happened whenever that stopped happening? They had not done anything. They hadn't lifted a finger to build any tentacles in this community. And the Nashville Superspeedway is going to have to do that. It looked great yesterday, but they better start building relationships whenever it's not the easy sellout, so they can then lean on those relationships to keep this thing going.
Darren, the other thing that is one of the biggest criticisms of that concrete surface was that it was a single groove, that you were going to be, a single file, follow the leader racing, which is typically pretty boring. But the big surprise yesterday was you saw them going three wide. I think that some of that is attributed to the change in technology with the Cup cars. But whatever the case, that was a very pleasant surprise, because it made, as one-sided as the race was, it did make for more entertaining racing.
There's no doubt about it. And Kyle Larson did not help that, even though you're right. There was much more exciting racing. Yes, at times three wide. It was surprising for me to even see that being in person. Like, wow, we just were not used to seeing that ever happen. It never happened in the previous times when they were in Nashville. But unfortunately, Kyle Larson, he is so good right now. He dominated the race. But hopefully they can continue. As you said, it's a mile and a third. It's a concrete surface. It's, your straight oval, not high banking. And so in the past, it is not proven to be to put out exciting racing. Kyle Larson made it look easy yesterday, but hopefully they can continue to tinker with it and do things here and there where this thing can become an exciting track, because that is another thing that they don't want, that this is kind of a boring track. You get out in clean air and away you go, and nobody's going to catch you, which is what it felt like at times with Larson. I just think it's more of a byproduct of that's where he is right now. He is dominating the sport. he is that Hendrick Motorsports. I mean, obviously Hendricks is having so much success, but Kyle Larson just what did he lead? I don't know. It was like 250 of 300 laps, something silly yesterday. But they'll have to continue to work on it. But you're right. It did have its times when they were doing things we've never seen before, and I know they worked hard to get that to happen. They'll have to continue to work hard to make it exciting racing moving forward.
Darren McFarland, host of Darren, Donica Chase, on with us here on Robby and Rexrode. Darren, took extra innings, but Vanderbilt gets it done on Saturday night, 7-6 against Arizona. Not the greatest start from Kumar Rocker. Didn't get a whole lot of help defensively in the first inning. What stood out to you with Vanderbilt's performance on Saturday night?
Arizona played at 3 in the first.
Yep.
I was like, okay, all right. This was the top offense in the country. And, yeah, Rocker is human. Now we'll find out if Leiter is human when they play on Wednesday. So, yeah, no, it was exciting. I made it. The wife, we watched every pitch. Maddox didn't make it. He didn't make it. He just.
Oh, Maddox!
I know. He tried to pretend the next day that he did, and he knew who won. I was like, dude, you were snoring right next to us, like we've got pictures, and we didn't. But he's like, really? I was like, yeah, we took pictures. Like you were asleep. It was an exciting game. I couldn't believe. How about this? By the way, I think this College World Series, I have been glued to the pitching performance last night by Mississippi State.
Yep.
I got home from the race. I watched that till the end. Wow. I think it's been off and running, but that was the first extra inning game since 2014. Like, how is that possible?
It's pretty incredible.
I was really shocked by that. Like 7 years since they've had an extra inning game in Omaha. But, look, they put up the key stat. It's no secret. And now that's what Tennessee's going to have to deal with, and they're going to have to hear, 5 national champs in the last basically 4 decades have come out of the losers bracket. I understand. Some people will be like, stats are meant to be broken, and yes, it's happened 5 times. But basically, you better win that first game, and you better not be trying to fight your way out of the losers bracket, which is what Tony Vitello and the Vols are facing. And that's what now Arizona faces. And the loser of that game, was going to have to face that. And Vanderbilt was dangerously close to losing that game. But what a performance to get back in it. They had so many opportunities there in extra innings. I mean, they get the pinch runner, and, everybody was wondering, what the heck are you doing? We had opportunities to advance the runner, and they didn't advance the runner. And they had opportunities to win it, but Arizona just stayed in it, and then finally they come through with the big bases-loaded single in the 12th, and away they go. I'll tell you what, this NC State team, you better watch out. I watched their series against Arkansas. It was impressive. When you get beat down 21-2 and you're in Fayetteville and you come back and you basically shut down Arkansas's bats, which is what NC State did, and they did the same thing to Stanford, they're going to be a tough out. They're full of confidence, and so it's going to be a lot of fun moving forward. But so far I've really, really enjoyed the College World Series, and I know there's a lot more to come.
Darren, we're halfway home in the Stanley Cup semifinals for a Barry Trotz versus Shea Weber Stanley Cup final. I'm here for it.
I'm all for it. I'll tell you what, man, I thought Montreal was going to pull that out last night. Gosh, I thought but I think both series – are dangerously close to heading right to 7. It feels that way, like both series. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed that as well. It stinks whenever the Predators are out, but, man, I am certainly rooting for Barry Trotz. I'm certainly rooting for Captain Shea Weber. I did get a kick out of your tweet last night during the game because I thought the same thing. Like, what are they doing? Like, that dude, that's the wrong bear to poke.
That's the wrong guy you want to start boarding into the wall, I can tell you that.
If you want to poke a bear, you might want to find another bear, like maybe a cub.
Yes.
Not Mama Bear. Mama Bear is going to take your head off.
I saw Tommy Nosek's life flash before my eyes, and I'm not even him. Just leave Shea Weber alone.
Meanwhile, Darren, if Montreal does make it, I'll guarantee you Maddox will fall asleep again watching the way they play.
That is a pretty good line. Yeah, it's not the most exciting style.
Good grief.
Yeah.
Just shutting it down, baby. Darren McFarland.
What was it midway through the second period? The shot totals were like 12-8 or something.
Oh, man.
It's great.
13-7.
It was
13-7.
It was enthralling.
Yeah.
Darren McFarland, host of Darren Donica Chase, has been our guest here on Robby and Rexrode. You can catch Darren every day here on ESPN 102.5 The Game, 10 to 2 on Darren Donica Chase. Darren, great stuff, brother. Appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, always fun. Thanks. Have a good rest of the show.
When we come back, we'll have that conversation. Who are Predators fans rooting for more, Barry Trotz or Shea Weber? We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Mark Howard, Ryan Porth here with you on this Monday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. And Mark, halfway home in the Stanley Cup semifinals, both series tied at 2 games apiece between the New York Islanders and the Tampa Bay Lightning. Game 5 coming up later tonight. And then Vegas and Montreal. Vegas gets it done last night. In overtime, they win 2-1 to tie that series up at 2 as well. Obviously, with the Islanders former Predators coach Barry Trotz leading the way there. He's been very successful, wins the Cup with Washington, has quickly turned around this New York Islanders team. And then Montreal, bit of an unexpected run through the playoffs. Shea Weber and company, former Predators captain, 2 wins away from the Stanley Cup final at this point. Who do you think Predators fans are rooting for more? Is it Barry Trotz? Is it Shea Weber? I think it's an interesting question.
I know how I feel. There's really not a whole lot of doubt. I'm rooting for Barry Trotz.
There you go.
Webbs, listen, I wish him well. But I have to admit that after the Subban trade, I wanted the Preds to win that trade. I got a little too competitive maybe for my – but now I'm okay with seeing him have a good postseason. I think it's interesting that, Ryan Suter thought when he left here that he would go on to greater glory with Minnesota. Well, I think they've won, one series? They beat Colorado one year, and that's been it. And I think it's ironic that, the bloom is pretty much off that rose, and, his contract has now become an albatross.
Parise too, yeah.
Parise absolutely is a guy that they probably, although he had a pretty good postseason. But whatever the case, I'm rooting for Trotzy. I think Barry's a Hall of Fame coach now. I don't think there's any doubt about that. He's won a cup. He's won multiple Jack Adams awards. He's been successful with 3 different franchises. I still don't know why Washington didn't bring him back. That was the dumbest thing. Ted Leonsis was chasing titles with the Wizards and the Capitals. He got one with the Capitals, and you would have thought that Barry was asking for Fort Knox, and he wasn't. And plus, Todd Reardon was stabbing him in the back.
Yep,
was pretty much taking measurements in his office. I mean, Barry pretty much said to him. That was the guy, by the way, who succeeded Barry and was fired last year for Peter Laviolette, ironically.
And didn't Trotz and the Islanders beat the Capitals, and then that got Reardon fired?
Yeah. It was
Poetic
about
justice.
as good as it gets. And Barry's saying, "Listen, you might be coach one day, but right now, I'm the head coach." And listen, it didn't, end beautifully, with Laviolette, although that was sort of swept under the rug. But Trotzy is Barry Trotz is such an amazing guy. In the same way I talk about Tim Corbin, Barry's way with people is just something that's amazing.
Yeah.
And he relates to everybody. I always thought with Laviolette, Laviolette could turn on the charm. If you were in his inner circle, you loved him. If you weren't, you didn't really like him that much. But Barry was nice to everybody. And there were a couple of times that I did stuff that ticked him off, and he said, "Listen, you're a part of the family, but right now you're grounded." And I offended Shea Weber by asking him about his contract. He was really sensitive about it, which was kind of ridiculous, but listen, it sort of is what it is. But I like Shea, and you guys know, you've been around Shea. You talk to him about everything but Shea, he's great.
Yep.
When you got to talk about Shea, sorry. But it's been kind of interesting watching him as the Montreal captain, and I think he's really he's excited to play for an Original Six franchise at this stage of his career, and I wish him well. I mean, he's really a good guy, but Barry, listen, I knew Barry from before the Preds got on the ice. I was out there at the Special Olympics with him, and a lot of heard him tell the stories even before. He talked about meeting Scotty Bowman and how cool that was. Like he said, Scotty Bowman knew my name. Well, Scotty Bowman knows his name now.
His name now for sure.
Not a problem. And and the thing I like about Barry is he teaches you, his success should teach everybody a lot about life. Because Barry walks in as a guy that a lot of GMs wondered if he could command a room.
Yeah.
And that was one of the questions about John Hines, because he's not tall. He's not doesn't have this big booming voice. But believe me, Barry Trotz can be as assertive as he has to be, as tough as he has to be. And most of the players who have played for him, really like playing for him. But beyond that, just a terrific human being. And yeah, hell yeah, I root for him.
Yeah, no, and can you imagine what sort of hockey we could be in store for if it's Montreal and New York in the final? A lot of defensive shutdown play in the neutral zone.
Well, yeah, listen, the Islanders have some offense.
They do. And Barzal, he's unbelievable.
Oh, Barzal, he's got Eberle. I mean, he's got a lot of guys who can score. And that's, the amazing thing about Trotzy, too, his success with the Islanders, is that John Tavares blows down, right before Trotzy gets hired. So welcome to the Islanders, Barry. Oh, by the way, your superstar is gone.
Yeah.
And still, Barzal has sort of, emerged. But, he's got guys like Josh Bailey. He's got Lee. He's got a lot of good players.
But even Anders Lee, he was out for the year,
midway right.
through the year.
Yeah.
He hasn't played in the playoffs.
Anders Lee sounds like he should be playing in a band, by the way.
Yes, yes, he does.
But anyway, they play Barry's, Barry's structured style. And, yeah, you guys are right. I mean, it's a defensive, defense first. Defense creates offense.
We'll continue to take your thoughts on Barry Trotz and Shea Weber. Got a lot of your thoughts to get to on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. We'll also get into a little expansion draft talk with the Predators as well. How would Mark approach the expansion draft if he were David Poyle? We'll get into that coming up next as well. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. 102.5 The Game and T-Mobile have partnered up to give you a chance to experience a Nashville SC game this season. Tune in later today to Darren, Donick, and Chase for the keyword to text in to win. Good luck from 102.5 The Game, T-Mobile, and Nashville SC. Welcome back in. Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robby Stanley, Mark Howard, Ryan Porth here with you on this Monday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. Caleb on the text line says, I'm going for Barry. After what Washington did to him, he should win it just to rub it in Washington's face. I think Washington probably at this point, I would hope they regret that fully at this point.
Yeah, I think after a couple of years.
But this would be even more so because, like, he doesn't have someone like Ovechkin.
Yeah.
Oh, I know.
Like, he's going, and the Islanders are within their division, so this would be the ultimate middle finger to the Caps.
Yeah, it absolutely would. He's almost there. Greg on the text line, rooting for Weber. Trotz already has his cup win. So I figured there'd be a couple people that would take that side of Shea Weber, rooting for him because Barry Trotz has already won a cup.
I think there would be a lot of people that might feel that way.
Yeah.
I also think there are some people that just don't want to see a team north of the border win the cup.
There is that too. A lot of hate on the Montreal Canadiens. By the way, have you seen the officiating in this series? It has been awful.
Brutal.
Last night, I mean, people were almost literally getting away with murder.
Well, in Game 3, did you see Petrie?
Yeah.
Like,
oh, yeah. Petrie's eyes, and then Corey Perry. I know, Predators fans are going to be just real broke up about Corey Perry taking a stick to the face, but, I mean, he about got his nose taken off.
Was Ryan Ellis out there?
Yeah.
I
didn't see him lurking around out there.
Kind of thing. Part of his nose did fall off.
I know.
I mean, the look on his nose last night, it was like out of a war movie.
Oh, yeah. It was rough. But nothing called on that play. They didn't call anything through the first half of the game last night. And then all of a sudden, after Weber and Nosek went after it, this little bitty hook and call, they started calling everything. I was like, what's going on here? You can't have it both ways. Either just call the game or don't, but don't start switching it up through the middle of the game. The officiating has been atrocious. I mean, the Canadian media was all – Ray Ferraro was all over it last night. Gord Miller was all over the officiating last night. It's been atrocious so far in this Vegas-Montreal series.
Pierre LeBrun was all over it. And, of course, Canadiens fans probably think the NHL has some sort of vendetta against them.
Because that's who they would have.
Exactly.
Yes. The team that's won 26 cups.
Well, let me just tell Montreal fans, NBC doesn't care.
No.
Because they lose the NHL after this year.
Yes.
So they really don't care.
They don't. That is for sure. So, Mark, speaking of the NHL, the expansion draft is looming for David Poile and the Nashville Predators. Interesting decisions to make coming up. You can go 7 forwards, 3 defensemen, 1 goalie, or you can go the 8 skater route. And we saw the Islanders last time around. They protected 5 defensemen. That could be an option for the Predators as well. As you look at the expansion draft for David Poile and the decisions that he has to make, how do you go about handling the expansion draft? And who do you think could be exposed that maybe could be a surprise? We've had some people throw out Victor Arvidsson maybe being exposed. Some people have said maybe you leave Ryan Ellis exposed. I don't agree with that, but we've heard some people throw that out there. How do you think the Predators handle the expansion draft?
I think they're going to protect 5D. I think Alexander Carrier's emergence, might have changed things. And I always say, remember John Blum.
Yeah.
A good postseason does not, make a career. But they've liked Carrier for a long time. I think RV absolutely will be exposed, as will Johansson and Duchesne. First of all, I don't think the two Duchesne or Johansson will get taken. I think Harvey might. That wouldn't surprise me. I think Tolvanen is a candidate. And you've heard others. But I think that's where the Preds have to go. I think they've got a chance to have a really good and deep D-core, and you don't give that up because good defensemen, as we know, don't grow on trees. Right behind good centers. But, that puts the Predators in a good position anyway, because if they have that kind of deep decor, that gives you tradable assets. So if you want to get a good forward, you hold on to those guys and then maybe make a deal down the line. You've got Ferentz, and he's not included in this, but I'm just saying in terms of they've got Fabro, they've got Ferentz. I mean, they've got a lot of good young defensemen, even for their third pairing, to think about. And, we're not totally sure if they're going to re-sign Ekholm. And if they don't re-sign Forsberg, they're going to have to trade for a forward. So I would not be surprised to see RV exposed. I think they view him, as a guy, who, was good for a while, but, is sort of a diminished player.
Well, and I think you're right about that. I think there's absolutely a good chance he could be exposed. The Ryan Ellis stuff, I get it. There are some Predators fans who are not impressed with Ryan Ellis. I think his contract is not going to end well, and it's not going to look good in the latter half of those years. But you can't just leave him exposed. You can't lose Ryan Ellis for nothing.
No,
to
you
your
can't.
point, if you end up wanting to make a move, you've got to protect him, and then you could trade him after that if you so choose to do so. But you can't just let him walk for nothing. Ryan
Ellis could fetch, a pretty decent package. So I don't see that happening. They could lose Trennan too, a guy that I really like too. I like his physicality. He might be a third or a fourth line player, but I think he has the potential to score 15 goals.
Yeah.
And I actually think that might be the guy that Seattle goes after. Maybe RV. I'd rather have him take RV than Trennan.
Well, and I think to that point, I'm looking at the forward group, and I agree. I think 5 defensemen is the way they're probably going to go. I'm looking at the forward group. You're going to protect Forsberg. I think you're going to protect Cunnin at this point too, based on what you gave up to get him and the way that he closed out the season.
Yeah.
Granlund is a free agent, so you don't have to worry about protecting him. Much past that, I mean, it's Yarncroke and Sissons that you got to really kind of figure out what to do there. There's not a whole lot of candidates at the forward. To me, there's no chance they're doing 7 forwards. There's not 7 forwards on this team that I think are worth protecting at that point.
No, they're their most valuable assets are on defense, primarily, once you get past 3 or 4.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just look at the decision coming up for David Poile, and a lot of it's going to revolve around Duchesne and Johansson. What do you have there? Is there any way you can move on from one of them? I agree. I don't think Seattle's just going to straight up take one of them for you. Now, could you trade something in addition to them to get Seattle to bite the bullet? Yes, you could probably.
But again,
what's it worth? What are you worth giving up, or what are you willing to give up in order to get Seattle to take one of those 2 contracts off your books?
Yeah, I get that. But we're also not talking about Kyle Turris. We're talking about 2 guys that have a chance to be productive. There are a lot of people around the league, a lot of analytics people, that feel like Matt Duchesne could bounce back in a big way next season. That his shooting percentage, which was under 4%, will be a lot better, and that'll translate into more goals. And that could, change Preds fans' opinions of him really fast and organizationally. As far as Johansson is concerned, he sort of is what he is, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I thought he had a really good postseason.
He did.
Loved his physicality, and he seems to be buying into John Hines and his staff. So, I don't know.
Well, I think Johansson at this point, you just kind of know what he is. I think he's always going to leave you wanting more in the regular season.
He's not going to score 60.
He's not going to score 60. He's not going to probably hit the 20-goal mark at this point. I mean, he's had some great regular seasons here too. I mean, a couple years ago he put up 50 assists, so it's not like he can't do it in the regular season. But I think we've seen enough at this point to recognize that there is a clear difference between Ryan Johansson in the regular season and Ryan Johansson in the playoffs.
So now it's playoff Ryan Johansson.
Now it's playoff Ryan Johansson. Maybe that's the nickname that gets passed on. We've removed it from Colin Wilson and is now to Ryan Johansson. But you know that David Beauclair talked about last week, that's kind of a good thing to a certain degree because at least you know what you're going to get out of him. I mean, in the playoffs, every year, with the exception of the Dallas series a couple years ago when no forward outside of Rocco Grimaldi was all that good, most of the part, Ryan Johansson's been pretty good in the playoffs for this team. And as disappointing at times as that is in the regular season, and with the production not being where it needs to be from how much he's been paid, you do know in the playoffs, when it comes around, he'll be there and he's going to play pretty well for you.
I could see David Poyle making a trade that might knock our socks off.
I could too.
I sort of see that a little bit. I just, again, John Hines did a phenomenal. I can't even begin to tell you how good a job John Hines did, to be honest with you. He got the most out of a lot of journeyman guys.
Yep.
This was not a prolific scoring team. Ellie Tolvanen, we think, is going to be a really productive player who hasn't yet learned the defensive end of the ice. We're not sure what Tomasino is going to be next year. We think we're going to see him. But the other aspect to this is, David's got to look at this team with clear eyes. And he's got to understand that, some of the guys that played well or were productive will probably not do it, this coming season. So it'll be interesting to me to see what he does. The Grantland thing fascinates me to no end. Where he went from one of the worst trade acquisitions to one of the best free agent signings.
Yeah.
How crazy is that?
It's been incredible to watch his role and how he's kind of responded since the coaching change took place with John Hines. We'll continue this discussion when we come back. Taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. Right now, though, got to tell you about my friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. And if you've been watching the NBA playoffs from the sidelines, now is the perfect time to get in on the action with FanDuel Sportsbook because during the conference finals, new users get 30-1 odds on any team to win their next game. That means you can win $150 on a $5 bet, and there are even more ways to win on FanDuel throughout the playoffs. The conference finals are set. Milwaukee taking on Atlanta in the East, and in the West, you've got Phoenix taking on the LA Clippers. When you win, you get your money. It's a layup. You get paid in as little as 24 hours. The app is easy to use, so just sign up with promo code ROB to bet the NBA Conference Finals with 30-1 odds. Once again, that promo code is ROB to unlock 30-1 odds on any playoff team to win their next game exclusively on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. You must be 21 or older and present in Tennessee. New users only. Must wager in designated offer market. A $10 first deposit required. $150 max bonus. See full terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Got a gambling problem? Call the Tennessee Red Line at 1-800-889-9789. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Final segment of the day here on this Monday morning. Mark Howard in today for Joe Rexrode. Joe will be back tomorrow, coming back from vacation from Michigan. Right now talking Predators and the expansion draft. Taking your thoughts on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. 615-737-1025. 615-737-1025. And Mark, one of the interesting and I think difficult things to try to figure out, especially in this league when things can change pretty quickly, is how exactly do you determine how close you are to being a true contender for the Stanley Cup? You've got some young pieces that have come in that you feel good about, some veteran guys, some of which played better down the stretch, some of which did not, and David Poyle's got to kind of sort that out as they move forward here in the offseason. But trying to determine exactly how close you are and then determine what moves you have to make to take that next step to getting back into Stanley Cup contention. As you said, it requires clear eyes if you're David Poyle this offseason. So as you watch the Predators come down the stretch, as you evaluate what this roster looks like right now heading into the expansion draft, how close do you think the Predators are to being a true contender for the Stanley Cup? How much work does this roster still need to have in order to get to that place if you're David Poyle and the Predators?
I'm not even sure they're a playoff contender, to be honest with you. If they go back to the regular schedule, it's going to be a lot harder for them to make the playoffs. Listen, you've got to be real with what got them to the playoffs, and that was, beating up on the lower rung teams. But, the Preds did improve. There's no question about it, and that was evidenced by their play at the end of the season. But they were also the beneficiaries of favorable scheduling. I mean,
a goaltender that's playing out of his mind, too.
Yeah, and UC Soros, absolutely, you're absolutely right. And that's where David has to look now. Okay, if Eeli Tolvanen is a top six forward, your coaching staff didn't even want to dress him, for most of the playoffs.
Yep.
Now, we'll all acknowledge improvement and everything else, but I think, you've got to decide, first of all, you got to get younger, and you've got to make a sacrifice. And you might have to take one step backward to take two steps forward. And I just think, we're going to see Tomasino next year. We're going to see some of the younger players. Listen, I don't think any of us thought that Carrier would end up as being a first-pairing defenseman.
Nope.
He'd been in the system, for so long that you just figured he was a third-pairing D guy, and there's nothing wrong with that. So they've got that. I just think that David's got an opportunity here. He's got a nice core of defensemen. He might have some surplus that he can trade, and let's see what he's going to do. And he's finally got a team that's bought in to what the coaching staff wants, which I think was the most important thing that was accomplished. Regardless of where they went in the playoffs, regardless of, one-loss record, they either were going to buy into what Hines and his staff, wanted, or they weren't. And they had to figure that out. So I think that part of it seems pretty evident. So, let's see what happens. And David's got the ability to go out there and make some trades. He's a very resourceful guy, but I still think he's gonna continue to need to reshape the roster and figure out to build this team to its identity. They found an identity last year.
Yep.
Now let's build towards it.
How concerned are you about Dante Fabro? He's 22 years old, did not play in that series against Carolina, was healthy enough to play, did not do it. It's we've seen this with defensemen before. It's a very difficult position to come in and play at this level, especially at a top four level like he did to begin this year. He's 22. He's a first-round pick. They had great things to say about him at the end of the regular season, and were impressed by the way he handled the situation. But the fact of the matter remains, he started the season off as a top four guy and couldn't find his way into the lineup into the playoffs. What's your concern level if you're a Predators fan with Dante Fabro at this point?
In my opinion, and based on the people that I talked to, I never thought he was a top four guy. You can sit there and put that label on him. I thought, during the bubble year, he should have been playing in Milwaukee, that first part of the season.
Yeah.
And he wasn't. And that might have hurt his progress. I don't know. But I also know this. Ryan Suter sat a lot of nights early in his career, and he turned out to be a pretty good defenseman.
He did.
As have others. So I wouldn't give up on Fabro quite yet. But, let's see what happens next year because they don't have to force him, into the first or second pairing if they don't have a lot of injuries. So there's plenty of depth there where maybe it's best for Fabro to play in the third D pairing and just, crawl before you walk.
So we're a couple of weeks removed now from the end-of-season press conferences and Pekka Rinne addressing the media, not quite sure of his future. At some point was going to sit down with David Poile. I would assume that's happening relatively soon, if that's not happened already. Your gut feeling on Pekka. Is he back next year as the backup goalie? Is he elsewhere in the league? Does he retire? Does he go back to Finland? What do you think happens with Pekka Rinne?
Well, if they want to go, for budgetary purposes, they can get a much cheaper backup goaltender. But I like Pekka in the room. Pekka's not just a great goaltender. He's a great teammate.
Yep.
And I think he has value. And, the fan base, still loves him. I just, him getting the King Clancy Award, I thought was extraordinary. Here's a guy who does so much in the community, has done so much for this franchise, and never pumps up his own tires. And I just, Pekka is one, you've been down there and so is Ryan. He's just one of the best people you're ever going to meet in this business. So I think that should be a priority. I think he's one of the few guys who has real value even when he's not playing.
I agree. And
he's going to be a good practice goaltender.
Yeah.
He's going to do a lot of things. He's going to help Saros, and I just see nothing but pluses with him on this team.
He left every option on the table, which you would expect somebody in his position to do. Do you realistically think there's any chance he goes and plays for another NHL team?
Yeah, I think anything's possible. I don't think that he has as much value to other teams in the NHL, really, as he does the Predators. I don't know. Maybe Seattle would be interested in him. You could do a lot worse.
You could
as a backup guy who might play 25 games. So I'm sure his agent will. I'm sure as we speak is making a lot of calls around the league to see what kind of value his guy has.
That's going to do it for us today here on Robby and Rexrode. Mark, we appreciate you taking time to join us this morning. It was fun, man.
Always enjoy it, Rob.
Absolutely. Joe will be back tomorrow. He is on his way back from Michigan today. We'll be back tomorrow reacting to a big game from Vanderbilt tonight, taking on NC State. Jack Leiter will be on the mound. Make sure you stay tuned for Darren Donick and Chase today. They'll have Darryl Waltrip coming up at 1 o'clock today on Darren Donick and Chase. Also, Chase McCabe, fresh off some public dressing duties at Nashville Super Speedway with the NASCAR race coming in this weekend. Great job by Chase McCabe on that front. We'll be back 6 a.m. tomorrow. Darren Donick and Chase is coming up next. This is ESPN 102.5 The Game.